There's an old joke.
Okay. What is that? That's this one. Okay. Hello, everybody. We're going to study Bruce Lee today because I'll tell you why when we get started. Yeah. Okay. Boop-a-doop, boop, boop. Throw this on. Second.
Alrighty, welcome to this. We're good there? Okay. And let me turn this guy off because it can't be on at the same time. Properties. Yeah. Okay, that's that one. This is this one. Okay, make sure the headset is working. Yes, okay, so we'll be ready when people come in. Okay, so hello, we're gonna watch some Bruce Lee stuff. Because I'll tell you why. So first of all, I just wanted to emphasize that Bruce Lee has been claimed by a bunch of dudes on the internet who have extremely chauvinistic beliefs about their own superiority. So I just want to note that. Okay, we're just gonna put that into a little box. The next thing I want to note is that I do really admire the philosophical framework that Bruce Lee applied, and also the fact that he cared about the body and movement and motion and expression of the self through the body in movement specifically. Thought that was very cool. So I used to have on my Facebook, like, I want to be the Bruce Lee of ballet. Like, so that's just for context. There was a little old lady. I stopped to get coffee on my way home from work. There was a little old lady, and she had fallen, possibly even been knocked over by some guys on scooters and somebody else too. Like these, like some dudes, punk kids, probably watching chauvinistic media, careened into, it sounds like, her and also another little old lady. The other little old lady she helped get towards where she needed to go, and then she realized she couldn't make it home. 2 blocks up, okay? So she asks if I can give her a ride. Is like, oh my gosh, I don't know because my car is full of crap. I was like, I don't want to hurt you to hurt yourself getting in and out of this car because there's like cans of drinks on the, like energy drinks and wrappers and stuff, because I just am not taking good care of the car because autism, whatever. Okay, so then I was like, are you sure? I was like, can I get you an Uber? She insisted, and she said she'd give me $10. Like, you don't have to do that. She insisted on that too. I start driving her. I'm talking to her a little bit. I ask her her name, and she says she's got a thicker accent. She's a Chinese woman, probably in her 80s. I now know definitively in her 80s because she goes, my name is Phoebe Lee. And I was like, Phoebe Lee? I was like, because I was like, oh, I don't know. Who knows? She says, look me up. Phoebe Lee. I am Bruce Lee's sister. It is at this moment that I hold back crying because one of my heroes that I also see as like a guiding light of it is possible to succeed, even though your legacy may never be understood because the world sucks, because of the philosophies that people have absorbed in order to protect themselves from doing actual work to develop themselves. Because if you want to, you can just get this like free pass to believe you're special and superior just by being male. This happened yesterday after work. And then she was just talking to me about things for the rest of the ride, and said I had very pretty eyes, which I greatly appreciated, and just like had a really nice attitude. Kind of went out of her way to ask me for help to go up. And yeah. So yeah, I met the sister of one of my heroes. And also what was so deeply upset, there was like an upsetting part of this. She's like a little old lady, and her face, like, she wasn't wearing expensive clothes at all, and like just had to ask a stranger for help, right? And like her face had like little marks on it that looks like she has eczema that's not being treated sufficiently. So I'm like infuriated on some level, where her brother's contribution is so incredibly vast. Like, he has influenced culture definitively on levels that it would be challenging to find an individual not impacted by him. And there's like billions of people on the planet. And she's living without sufficient support, which gets me back to, oh my God, first of all, we don't care for people who are older in our society, but especially like elderly women we don't care for. And care for in that, like, what the hell? And so if you can be the sister of one of the most impactful people ever, who even gets co-opted as like a symbol of male virility or something, and that's where you're left, our society, that's what it decides your value is, as if she doesn't understand his philosophy better than any of these numbskulls. You know what I mean? She also, I was looking up videos, she does like Tai Chi. She's able to do, she can do his 1-inch punch. Like, and so this is one of the people that best understood Bruce Lee. Do you think Bruce Lee would want his sister to be put into a position where she doesn't have sufficient support? I am infuriated. Oh, I'm deafened and muted on Discord. I am. This is true. Let me turn that off. Thank you. Okay. This did an amazing cooking an hour ago. Some random guy in the mall said, "You must love eating McRibs," huh, and laughed with his friend as they walked away. These adult males couldn't walk by strangers attempting to bully them about their body weight. So I had the opposite of a cookie. Well, and that's okay. So I bet those same idiots, I'm sorry, I have to call it at some point. If you stop them and ask them, "Hey, what do you know about Bruce Lee? Do you like Bruce Lee? Do you find Bruce Lee inspiring?" I bet they'd say yes. Oh, am I still muted? What? Oh, wait, I'm still muted? Wait, I shouldn't be. Wait, what? Huh? Wait, hang on, let me go over here. Anyways, so point being, like, I think that, oh, you're right, I am. I don't know what I think what did I do? That's funny. Okay, well, it's fixed. Thank you. I guess I had to turn off the mute from the main section. Thank you. Thanks, Jade. What has gone wrong in their lives that they act this way? Like, oh my God, yes. Yes, and Phoebe was talking to me about how young men are different now. They've changed, right? And that they're basically very impulsive, like more so than ever before. Not that like young people don't go through a phase of that, but that they're basically completely out of control, and they don't have what was the specific she was saying? Like they don't see anything except themselves. Like they're so self-centered that they are and focused on each other. You know what I mean? Like they're basically unable to care about anything but their little jokes. That's it. So I mean, I'm just saying. So there's that. Yeah, that young men are they're in a deeper cult. I think so. I think that males in particular have taken to brainwashing themselves as a coping mechanism for the illusions that they were told to buy into, not really working. They're just pushing further and further. Hello! I didn't get back to you. You know why? Because I met Phoebe Lee and my brain imploded.
I figure with us, there's like a 50-50 chance when we say we're going to do something, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like just across the board. So
no, I had to go home, think about life, cry, look up Phoebe Lee. Anyway, so we're gonna talk about the philosophy of Bruce Lee a little bit later in the stream.
Okay.
And watch some videos on that. It's so lovely to have you in.
I'm lovely.
Yay. We could do it now, but let me just check in with our I came up with a thing. So when actually I don't know if you saw this in vocabulary. I'm going to read it out. So
yeah, but I forgot. So tell me again.
Yeah, and I'll tell the whole clique of everybody here. Okay, so new word, and for us it will go up in quantity, and I'll mention the quantity words. So a dyadoscope, kind of like kaleidoscope, dyad, a collaborative unit consisting of two individuals who work together using a combination of observation and problem-solving techniques. This term emphasizes joint observation and the flexibility to either build or arrive. So it could be, interneurological, but for us, we're going to be the build mode primarily. Build or arrive at solutions based on their findings, i.e. goals, or what I call nodes, which is what I think autistic people do rather than set goals. The dyadoscope model is designed to be inclusive of different neurological perspectives, promoting effective and cooperative problem solving. So right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, we are now a tetradoscope. You can also do triadoscope.
I love it.
3. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. Yay.
I enjoy that. I like that term a lot, actually.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so in the spirit of that, let's do a check-in, including chat. I guess there's got to be a multiverse version of this where it keeps expanding out to how many people are participating. But anyways,
in the world.
Yeah. A universal scope. So
Sure.
young men have been increasingly, Lilith says, young men have been increasingly separated from those pillars of society that used to keep them somewhat tethered to caring about community beyond themselves. The kinds of speeches world leaders used to give to young men to motivate them wouldn't resonate anymore. And I think possibly there was some rejection of it because there was an unspoken motivation that wasn't helpful. So in order to give young men, and I address this to young men because I do think it's significant, the puberty that young men broadly were going to go through, the one that they're set up to go through, assuming there's no big endocrinological changes. They suddenly are a lot stronger than not only everybody in their family, probably including their own dad, but stronger than most people on Earth, right?
Yeah.
That's got to do something to you. So you need to be able to work through that. And there's been this incentive to talk to men about it in order to make sure they're still open to being soldiers. So I can see a rejection of that. But the problem is now these guys are saying, no, the problem wasn't that we were being told how to cope and also maybe be soldiers. The problem is we're no longer being told to be soldiers. So they're trying to create little gangs.
Oh, that's not a good, no.
Right?
What? No.
If you look at who's a role model in the online sphere, they're basically acting like kingpins. So I just think this is a lot of gang recruitment, but in a really weird, disembodied way. They don't actually have to follow through on this with physical violence, when in the past that would have been how you show that you've been successfully hazed into and recruited for membership in some sort of little gang. So I think militaries are gangs also, so hot take, but we need to have speeches for
a cult,
go ahead. Yeah,
in my opinion,
I agree. Yes,
they're not so much like gangs as they are cults.
Yes, I agree, because
it is definitely especially hearing from one of my best friends who was a Marine, the things that they put you through. And it makes sense for the military because you can't think, you just have to shoot that guy.
Yes.
In a way, right?
Yes.
So they need you to follow instructions immediately. They don't need you to think. That's not the point. They need you to be able to sacrifice for the group. And the thing is that now the things that not even now, but just the things that they're asked to sacrifice themselves for are meaningless and stupid.
Yes.
And they're coming back super disillusioned.
Yes.
And I mean, that's just how it's always been. That's why, no one was right when they came back from Vietnam, and no one was right when they came back from World War II, and no one talked about it because there was no pressure for men to be emotional or to, there was no hey, no, there's consequences for beating the shit out of a bunch of people or your wife or whatever, there's, and your job is still very physical. So there's some kind of therapeutic benefit to that, I would assume, right? If in some way, right? Or you give yourself to your job But now your job is not willing to, like, that's not a smart thing to do anymore. That's not how it works. And you know what I mean? It's not just not
Yes.
smart anymore for anyone to do that. We don't
Well, and that's
tie
why.
ourselves to companies that way.
Yes, I know. Well, and that's why I think when we get into a little bit of like listening to Bruce Lee, I feel this way about ballet. So to be clear, if you
Mm-hmm.
express yourself physically, it does not have to result in your body careening or colliding into another body.
Right.
But it is very
That is
important,
very fair.
right? It's very important to express yourself physically, and the better that
Mm-hmm.
you get at that process, the more refined that it is. There is something that's like extremely therapeutic, but also allows you to be free from your body being used by other people, free from the trauma of that.
Yes. Yes. I would assume that that's true as well.
Mm-hmm. So it may be that in more physical jobs in the past, which we don't have so much because manufacturing has changed so dramatically, there may have been
Mm-hmm.
moments of tapping into this physical self-expression, but that it
Well, and
wasn't.
here's my question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is I think those traditional uses of the idea of what our bodies can do in accordance with our sex have certainly gone down. Like, women are not required to have children any longer.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like, there's a whole movement against not having kids, and like, there's a whole, even if you have kids, like, you also have to work. So, like, we are not being asked to be mothers and wives in the same way.
Right.
So what is and, we go through a process where, oops, suddenly you can be a mom.
Yeah.
And we're not asked to do that anymore. Is there any correlation to that? Or is this a completely different phenomenon, do you think?
So what I think
That's
is
just a man thing.
my problem with what's happened to women. So it's good that we can make that decision because it is a decision about how we're going to exist embodied. We don't just like get pregnant, stork arrives. It's 9 months of changes to your body that
Right.
are not well understood, to be really clear. Even today, a lot of the things that doctors will tell pregnant women are fucking nonsense. So me as a fitness professional, right? I did 10 years with Daily Method, and they're targeted more towards women, not for any special reason. I wish more guys came in, to be honest, but we were more resonant with women. So we had prenatal and postnatal instruction. Like as teachers, we learned how to work with that population, and what we had to learn was we were going to triage injuries that doctors didn't realize these women were facing, and we were going to have to debunk nonsense that the doctors were telling women, where the women were then suddenly afraid to move their bodies because doctors were saying this might mess up your pregnancy, this might mess up your pregnancy, it's crazy. So a lot of what we
fucking knows.
No one knows.
So it was just like everything.
Right. And I believe it goes back into a dichotomous thing of men are moving, women are inert. Like, women are not moving. So the idea of like, well, if you want to make sure that nothing goes wrong, don't move, which is crazy and not how it works. So what I think happens, what I think happens with women is we're told like, okay, you can participate in society, but you are not going to have movement arts. Right, you're not really going. We're not going to put special emphasis on that. We're going to belittle the movement arts that you already have a comfortable entryway into. We're going to call ballet dancers all kinds of names, and we're also going to say that if you want to be in the movement arts, you have to emulate the things that we think are cool for men, which is a bunch of lift weights, which I am frankly not very impressed with. I mean, I understand there's people that like to do like competitive bodybuilding and weightlifting, but me personally, I take some issues with that idea and that aesthetic. I think it's a bit beyond contrived. So women are not given space either to cultivate our sense of the body and movement and expression through the body and movement, right?
Sure.
And men are also so both parties are told that's not really that important. Men, however, get to own it. They get to own anything vaguely
Yes.
resembling it. So women are not able to even make decisions about pregnancy based on their body and how they feel about what they're currently doing with it and if how that would impact them. It's always about this idea of like the caretaking role after pregnancy is completed and you have this kid. All of a sudden you're just back into this cerebral land of regulating other people's emotions instead of you are embodied. So the embodiment of women, I think, is not not developed as a philosophical realm, whereas with men there's been a lot of people like a Bruce Lee who have talked about embodiment in this philosophical realm, but because the cults that the men are in, they don't hear that part of it. All they hear is
Right.
I'm strong, I'm strong, I'm strong, I'm strong.
I hear that. I've actually been having this conversation with like a couple of men recently about just how few emotions we allow men to feel.
Yeah.
And like how we sort of keep emotion away from them in a sense and not accessible.
Yeah.
And then we get mad at them when they can't do it, as opposed to like anger is the only one that we give them and we allow them to handle because we, mothers tend to, and I see it, certainly I was still in kind of a way, but like see it as kind of like we coddle them, right? Like we deal with their emotions for them.
Yes.
We deal with the circumstances that control their emotions for them.
Yes.
Instead of asking them to handle their own emotions.
Yes.
And therefore, like they then can never handle them. And then they want to like beat the shit out of people when they feel anything because all they can feel is anger. Because the problem is that like you didn't handle my emotions.
Yes.
For me. Why not?
Yes. Well, and so I came up with a term. So there's something called aggrieved entitlement that comes out of feminist theory. And that's just basically saying that if somebody feels that they are owed a certain level of attitude of, I guess, deference towards them, or are owed being prioritized, some degree of like hierarchy, right? And they're not given that, they respond with aggression and respond as if they've had some great injury that's unfair. So there's that. So then I added on to that to say there's something called what I'll say denialation. And under the system that we're currently in, we get something that I would call patridenialation, as in patriarchy's form of denialation. Denialation is when a person is told no by another person. It's basically, they said, this is what I want. And the other person says, no, I am not doing that. Right? Or I want this instead, and these are contradictory, so I'm not going to do that because it contradicts what I want. It's the person hearing that no, responding with threats, aggression, coercion, manipulation, explosive anger, so that it's like a tantrum, but in an adult body. So it's much more dangerous. And I think that's part of it. So they can't hear no. Not only do they not know how to regulate themselves, and they're demanding regulation, if you say no to that, they also can't handle the
that
no.
That is not cool.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, the two kind of men that I've been talking to about this are both men that I would say have a higher than average emotional intelligence. Not even just for a man, but in general.
Yeah, for a person. Right. Yeah.
For a person. Yeah. Like, not just in the sense that they weren't taught whatever, but like, no, I think just normally. And so I just, it worries me how um, much they, how much heightened their sense of emotional intelligence needs to be in order to access that thought process.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
That worries me.
Yes.
A
Like
great
they
deal.
have to be extremely, I'm assuming these are also men that are not very young.
Yeah, they're like our age.
Yeah. So we're not talking like
So they're not
20s.
they're not teenagers.
No. Right. So
They're not
yeah.
college kids.
Right. Right. So you have to be extremely
So,
mature, but that means something has failed where these are people that they can't be told no. Like they being told no is its own catastrophe, and that's not reasonable because in adult interactions and adult relationships, you have to be able to
you will
say
be
that
told no.
yes, and you have to be able to handle being told no.
And so their ability to not just hear the word no, I would say, but just express themselves to begin with, like know what their needs are, period, is higher than what I tend to see in, because I guess I always think of like children because you can see such a marked difference so early.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like, you need to wait till they're an adult or it's different. Like, no, I see it very early.
Right. Yeah.
Like, very markedly.
Yes. Yes. And this is a problem because getting back to what I'm saying, that I think it's very significant in embodied sense what males go through in puberty. So if you have a kid, right, and then they have an inability to accept a denial or a refusal, and they start to immediately do coercive, aggressive, or threatening actions, what happens when they suddenly have physical force on their side?
Right. Right. Well, and in a more base sense, like, we talk about this at work a lot because our kids that come in that do not have, obviously all our kids have have communication issues, right? Whether they, in whatever sense that looks like for them, they all have communication issues. And so a lot of them, when they were little or when they're smaller, throw tantrums.
Yes.
Right? And there is a very clear line where, specifically with the boys, and not completely not with the girls, but it's not nearly as big of a deal. I have one kid that's like, he's 16. We're working on like first grade stuff, right? And socially, he will interact with in sort of a typical first grade fashion, but he's a big 16-year-old person. Like, he is a full-grown 16-year-old person.
Yeah.
And it is dangerous for him, right? Not to still be using the emotional regulation techniques of someone younger than him.
Yes.
Because he will either hurt somebody.
Yes.
He will get arrested.
Yes.
He will get the police called on him. He will get shot. Like, it's a huge deal. And my boss, that's why she's so specific about, no, we don't do that here. Like, we don't allow that to continue because we see this as a very, very serious issue for them when they get older.
Yes. Yes.
Like, it's not cute when they're 16 and could break your neck on accident.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that is a very weird, like, oh shit kind of moment.
Right.
As a person.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't really have the same sense of that with how our puberty goes down. Like, so I think this hasn't been discussed. And if we do want to talk about like differences, this is something that's getting lost, and I don't really know why it's getting lost at this point, like in our society. It just enough has happened that is sort of unrelated, that a philosophy has emerged of embodiment that I think is stupid, where it's like we don't want to believe the patriarchal cult as far as it exists, which is broadly speaking Abrahamic religions, but it goes a little bit beyond that. But broadly speaking, it's a lot of Abrahamic religions. We don't want to say that their version of the human body is correct. So now we just don't think about the human body at all.
Yeah.
And
well, and I think
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, you go.
Okay. I mean, and to a lesser degree, like you're saying, the comeback of that psychologically, I guess, too, or like in a the therapeutic sense, in the way that there's a much bigger emphasis on somatic kind of treatments.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
That sort of like trauma lives in the body kind of thing, which I know that there's like some problematic shit that goes along with that book.
Yeah.
But, like that, it's not, you can't treat trauma just as a mental deal, that there is a lot of benefit that comes from like, obviously mindfulness and yoga and whatever their somatic treatments are that I don't really know because I want to do them, but they're also still very hard to access.
Yes.
Because people are like, yeah, whatever, like woo-woo, whatever. Which is also kind of bullshit, but
yeah. I think there's been separate, and this gets back into the issue of like not thinking about our bodies. We have a belief in like mind-body dualism, which is also broadly Abrahamic. So what you can do if you have mind-body dualism is say that your brain is being trapped in a body, and that while you are influenced by your body as a brain, right? If you were in a different body, your brain would be relatively the same, which is just not true. Right? That's nonsensical. So your brain and your body are a singular organism. Hi, Blink. And if you are developing throughout your life with this belief that your brain and body are kind of like locked together but are not actually one thing, then you can start to have a lot of like very pathological and harmful views about what mental health is, right? Where it's like, oh, that's psychosomatic. What do you mean it's psychosomatic? How do you know?
Yeah, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah. So I don't really believe in like psychogenic illness. I think that the brain and body are communicating simultaneously at all times in ways that we don't fully understand because our ideas and models of it are just simply wrong. So we've created a very mechanical view of what the body is, as if we control it, as if we control the body. Right. Which is just like it's an understandable mistake because it intuitively feels like that's what we're doing. Like when I move my arm, it feels like I'm controlling my arm. So I get it, but that's not really what's happening.
Well, and it's a great way to control people and keep them from having sex and, doing drugs or drinking wine or, I don't know, whatever religious thing you really need them to quit doing is like overcome your body. Because then also when you sleep deprive people and you keep them from eating and you see that in a lot more like religious cults than you'd imagine.
Yes.
Is the food restrictions and the, emphasis on like literally working like all the time in a way that is sleep, because you get people hungry and sleep deprived and they're not thinking rationally. It just doesn't, you have a lot more control over them that way.
Yeah, yes, you do. And I think most religions and most modern cults and cultish practices have an idea of transcending the body. And I think ultimately that comes down to we don't want to get old and die. So if you see, the enemy is the body getting old and dying on some level, and you're going to promise people that by being an agent of this cult, by being at the very least something that like buffers its numbers so that it has more power, because in a hierarchy you can then bully people around and say you're going to do what we say. You can control society and people's actions more. If that's what you're going to do, then it's necessary for you to say, well, we're going to give you relief from aging and dying. It's not that people hate their bodies or they just don't want to get old and die. They don't want to have uncomfortable changes to their body. And they don't want, they just don't want to lose things. And the nature of aging is you do lose properties of your body as you age.
Yeah, that's just how
There's
it works.
also one other component that maybe it's worth mentioning, is that people don't want to lose the ones that they care about, right?
Yes.
That's kind of the scary thing about death.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Why did I not think about that? I just totally didn't even. Oh, right, people. We like people, and we don't want them to die.
Yeah,
definitely.
Right, that too.
Forgot.
People in the chat, I'm gonna fix the volume. By the way, I think it's all wonky. Is it good right now?
Yeah, I'm not looking, so I cannot be.
Sometimes I'm boosting it. I'm like, oh wait, I just had my volume down too low, so maybe. Okay. Hey, you wanna watch some Bruce Lee and talk about it and talk about how this applies to autistic people? Because I also think our sense of embodiedness is different.
I am going to hang up close and listen.
All right, let's
to
do
that.
it.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna
All
put.
Right. I didn't know if I counted.
Yeah, I'm gonna put share screen up in a second. We're gonna go with the one I just watched because I thought it was interesting. Okay.
While you do that, I will tell you that I got the best compliment the other day that relates to this.
Oh.
On online dating, which is that someone was like, I really love how your gray is coming in.
Yay.
And I was like, thank you.
Yes.
I was like, that is an amazing compliment.
That is
amazing. You are doing a good job here.
Yay. I love it. Okay, let's this is 5 minutes and 40 seconds. There's like maybe one or two parts of this. It's an interview where the interviewer kind of goes off in a direction that's less interesting, but most of it just Bruce Lee is answering things that are really, really cool. Okay.
Well, I mean, definitely in the beginning, I had no intention or whatsoever that what I was practicing and what I'm still practicing now would lead to this to begin with.
Pause. I really hate the clips that they threw in, just to be super clear.
Can't hear any of it.
Oh, you can't? Oh, no. Wait, did you click on the thing to watch it?
It's working for me. I can hear it.
I'd just say, Jane, that maybe the volume is just a bit on the low side.
Okay, I'm going to turn it up. Thank you. Okay, let's try this again. So yeah, so ignore the interjected clips. They're stupid.
But martial art has.
Let me go back, actually. Hold on.
Well, I mean, definitely in the beginning, I had no intention or whatsoever that what I was practicing and what I'm still practicing now would lead to this to begin with. But martial art has a very, very deep meaning as far as my life is concerned, because as an actor, as a martial artist, as a human being, all these I have learned from martial art.
Maybe for our audience who doesn't know what it means, you might explain exactly what you mean by martial art.
Right. Martial art include all the combative arts like karate or karate, judo, Chinese kung fu or Chinese boxing, whatever you call it. All those. You see, like Aikido, Korean, I can go on and on and on. But it's a combative form of fighting. I mean, it's not, some of them became sport, but some of them are still not. I mean, they use, for instance, kicking to the groin, jabbing fingers at the eyes, and things like that.
No wonder you're successful in it. Chinese movies are full of this kind of action anyway. They needed a guy like you could...
Violence, man.
So you didn't have to use a double when you moved into the motion picture world here. You did it all yourself. Right. Can you break 5 or 6 pieces of wood with your hand or your foot?
I'll probably break my hand and foot.
But tell me a little bit, you set up a school in Hollywood, didn't you, for people like
Yes.
James Garner and Steve McQueen and the others?
Yes.
Why would they want to learn Chinese martial arts? Because of a movie role?
Not really. I mean, most of them, you see, to me, at least the way that when I teach it, all type of knowledge ultimately means self-knowledge. Mm-hmm. So therefore, they're coming in to, and ask me to teach them not so much of how to defend themselves or how to do somebody in, rather, they want to learn to express themselves through some movement, be it anger, be it determination, or whatsoever. So in other words, what I'm saying, therefore, is that he is paying me to show him, in combative form, the art of expressing the human body.
Which is acting, in a sense, isn't it?
Well...
Or it would be a useful tool for an actor to have.
It's... I mean, it might sound too philosophical, but it's acting, or acting, unacting. If you...
You've lost me.
I have, right? So what I'm saying, actually, you see, I mean, it's a combination of both. I mean, here it is the natural instinct, and here is control. You are to combine the two in harmony. Not, if you have one to the extreme, you will be very unscientific. If you have another to the extreme, you become all of a sudden a mechanical man, no longer a human being. So it is a successful combination of both. So therefore, it is not only, so therefore it's not pure naturalness or unnaturalness. The ideal is unnatural naturalness or natural unnaturalness.
Yin yang, eh?
Right, man, that's it.
Yeah, one of your students, James Coburn, played in a movie called Iron Man Flint, in which he used karate. Is that what he learned from you?
He learned it after.
Oh,
after,
he went...
yeah.
After he played in Iron Man Flint.
Right. You see, actually, I do not teach, karate, because I do not believe in styles anymore. I mean, I do not believe that there is such thing as like Chinese way of fighting or the Japanese way of fighting or whatever way of fighting, because unless human beings have 3 arms and 4 legs, we will have a different form of fighting. But basically, we have only 2 hands and 2 feet. So styles tends to not only separate man, because they have their own doctrines, and then the doctrine became the gospel truth, that you cannot change, But if you do not have styles, if you just say, well, here I am, as a human being, how can I express myself totally and completely? Now, that way, you won't create a style, because style is a crystallization, that way, it's a process of continuing growth.
You talk about Chinese boxing. How does it differ from, say, our kind of boxing?
Well, first we use the feet.
That's
and then we use the elbow. And
you use the thumb too?
You name it, man. We
use it all.
You have to, you see, because, that is the expression of the human body. Everything, not just the hand. And when you're talking about combat, well, if it is a sport, now you're talking about something else. You have regulations, you have rules. But when you're talking about fighting as it is,
no rules.
With no rules.
Not real fighting.
Well, then, baby, you better train every part of your body. And when you do punch, now I'm leaning forward a little bit, hoping not to hurt any camera angle. You gotta put the whole hip into it and snap it and get all your energy in there and make this into a weapon. Well,
So that's where we're going to start. So there's some stuff that was superfluous, but it depends on what's happening there. So I think that, first of all, he's talking about the human body, an expression of the human body. and he doesn't make criteria for that of which kind of human body is going to be expressing itself. I also really like the natural unnatural, or acting unacting, or unacting acting. So I think all of that's really important. So for autistic people, we sometimes talk about masking, right? So we say we're going to change our natural behaviors for some reason. And what I think we should come to a fuller understanding is that we will always express our natural behaviors even when we try to alter them for various reasons. At the core of it, we do those alterations through the natural expression of our movement, our body. So yeah, so this whole conversation is one of how to move through the world with a body that doesn't behave like other bodies for reasons for us that are rooted in our brain, which is very confusing for other people because they have this dualism.
Can I say something about masking? Is that okay?
Yes.
So, like, I'm someone who tends to mask a lot. I'm honestly, can I be honest?
Yes, definitely.
Sometimes I honestly feel like not comfy being autistic. Like, sometimes it's like, okay, cool, I'm autistic, but other times I'm like, I just want to be normal. I just want to fit in. So it's like I spend a lot of time masking, especially, places where I just want to seem normal and fit in to avoid judgment.
Mm-hmm.
So I, I don't know where the, even when we're masking, we still do normal things. Probably for me, it would be my habit of scheduling and trying to have my day planned and controlled. Maybe that would be it.
Yes, and I the other thing is when he said, like, if you try to do more unnatural things, that it becomes the mechanical man. I really like that idea of like becoming mechanistic, because you're using external tools to control what you seem to be doing. And what's weird about that is like it's only seemingly controlling you. You are still only able to act from what's natural to you. So even our masking, it's weird because it kind of also gives us away, because a normal person doesn't do that. So the state that we're in, what we're really trying to do is just not distract people. We're not trying to alert them that we're present. So masking is, in a sense, camouflaging what's going on, so that, like, camouflaging, like you're in the background, sort of camouflaging, like you are trying to not stand out from the environment. And
when you do stand out, you're trying to stand out in, like, a way that seems normal. Like, in the college setting, you answer the questions the professor poses.
Well, it's
stuff like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think that's more. I would say that that's still not standing out in the framing I'm suggesting, because you're being perceived, but nothing is unusual. So if something is a static image, let's say it's just a photo of the forest, right? We're like, okay, nothing stands out or is unusual in this picture. There's no, like, big neon purple thing that shouldn't be there. If you've watched like AI videos or the new like iterations of it, they still have mutations that happen that are wrong.
Terrifying.
Yeah, so that's what we're trying to avoid doing. So you're now just like, rather than a still image, and you're not trying to be the weird thing, now it's a moving image, and you're trying not to be the distracting thing. So you're still attempting to not stand out, because standing out in this context means that you are confusing, and also may have the ability to be misunderstood. Like some explanation is imposed on you for why your behavior is different, that is inaccurate. And so you don't want to be set up for people to believe things about you that are untrue, or to look at you in the future because now you're a threat. Like you've already signaled there, pay attention to that. So we basically are trying to not be paid attention to because we don't trust people to do anything kind or helpful with the knowledge that we're different.
I have, like, a thing to say about that whole, like, not being paid attention to as well. Like, I hope I'm not hijacking anything.
No,
I'm
yeah,
sorry if I am.
yeah. Just as I think this discussion is supposed to somewhat include where people are at today, and I'll guide it a little bit back towards like why I brought up Bruce Lee. But please.
Okay. So, like, I'm someone who's like, if I want to be, I guess, perceived, I want to be perceived positively. I don't want to be perceived negatively. I don't want people to like not like me, be mad at me. Is that like part of the autism, do you think, or is that just like normal?
So that's normal. That's normal. We don't want to, and my guess as to why we don't want
like,
to.
And
go ahead.
Especially with the anxiety, like, like me, if I make a mistake, I'm like, that's gonna haunt me for the rest of my life. But with the anxiety, it's like extra hard. And I'm sure with the autism, that makes.
If I may interject,
yes.
I think sort of the feeling that you're bringing up is shame, which is the universal human emotion. And at the core of it is a desire to be loved, right? And so shame is to do with the rules that are set by society as to what is considered to be shameful and non-shameful behavior. So obviously we try to act in ways that we're socialized to not be shamed for the things that we are, because we need to be accepted and validated, right?
Yep. Yeah. Good point.
Well, and that's what I was going to say as well. So if you're like, I don't want, you're saying it's going to haunt you, right? So if you're saying, I don't want people to perceive me in this inaccurate way, right? Or notice me in this negative way, it's because of what they will do in the future. If you were never going to see these people ever again, and they weren't going to say anything to any immediately forgotten, it wouldn't matter.
Guys, I do work, like, little finger, I'm like the smallest fuck up. Sometimes I do worry, like, they're gonna tell someone. It's a stupid worry. I know. That's what a generalized anxiety disorder does.
Well, hold on. It's not a stupid worry. So do you have that worry specifically because this is what I think is happening for autistic people, and I'll explain why I don't think that worry, you're suggesting that it's irrational. I don't think it's irrational. I think autistic people have a form of blindness, like literally in the sense that visual spatial information is not processed, that other people are exchanging since their earliest years. They've developed a concrete and sophisticated way of exchanging this information we can't see. So for the autistic person, we are walking around in a field of information we can't see that people think we can see, and that it's normal to exchange in order to make decisions as individuals and in respect to other people. So collaboratively, you're supposed to make decisions based on this information, in the same sense that people can make decisions based on visual information that's more obvious, like the colors of things, the shapes of things, the placement of objects in the room. That's the information we're missing. And so when we feel anxious about what signals we're giving out to these people that have this full spectrum of visual information, that then turns into metaphors about social interaction. That social interaction is actually a visual spatial skill that's been abstracted. That social skills are visual spatial primarily, and that 1 second, it must be over here.
In the same space now.
You're hearing her through Kyle's mic.
Okay, that's what
I can hear now. Can you guys hear me?
Okay, you're good now.
That's weird. Yeah. When the OBS crashed, it knocked me out too. So OBS just reconnected, so we're back online. That's weird.
Okay. All right.
Okay, well, so as I was saying, here's what I think is happening, and here's what I think the problem is. So autistic people are getting in the way of other people because we can't see the information they're using to navigate, because it's based on a visual spatial skill. Social skills are visual spatial skills that have evolved over time to become this language that's symbolic. So it's a symbolic expression of a visual spatial skill that we do not have access to because of our disability inside of our brain. That's what I think autism is. So when we're worried about these interactions, it's because we're never going to be able to exchange that information in the same way that somebody with congenital blindness is not really going to be able to exchange any visual information, certainly not in real time. So if you're thinking about it and ruminating over it, it's because you don't have help to keep you from getting in the way of other people. You're going to suddenly be where you're not supposed to be. You're going to not be where they told you to be. You're not going to be able to cooperate with other people unless you can get really explicit instructions that don't rely on this social information. So that's our problem. And I think that when we get down to like disability accommodations, what we actually need is some sort of conveyor belt that will move us through those types of goals. While sitting on the conveyor belt, we can keep doing our type of accomplishments, like our way of our contributions, which I don't think could ever be these doing as arriving negotiations. So we need something that just moves us through society while we sit there and don't have to see where we're going. We need like a monorail for autistic people socially.
So like a more streamlined process of getting things done.
Well, we need a mechanical process that doesn't make us have to see things that we can't see.
So say, for example, you're doing a group project and you have to say, get this part done, this part done, this part done. Would it be more helpful for people on the spectrum to have like a specific schedule of when do we need this part done? And if you're working with people who aren't on the spectrum, how do you use the schedule, tell them why you need the schedule, or do you do it without the schedule and just trust in the team?
What would make sense, I think, because I don't think this has been sorted out, so I'm going to just speculate. Let's say you have to contribute something to the project, okay? You should be making that thing, if it's based on research and based on like building something with your hands, like writing, typing, creating, whatever, assembling, and then that thing you're building should be updated to the team. They should get progress photos of it, basically. And then if they need you to change what you're doing, they tell you. And if you have an opinion of like, hey, I don't think that's a good idea, you can also give them feedback. So basically, like, that's your interaction with the team. The rest of it, no. You just give them progress. This is my first thought.
There's no reason to do the rest of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The team doesn't need you to figure out when to meet and to sit in the same room. And like, because we're not going to get the same. I just watched so many autistic kids trying to do group projects that I'm like fed up with it at this point. Like, just tell them what they need to do. We need you to do blah. And then they go off and they do the thing. They do it to a certain point, and then they send, hey, I'm doing this. And then everyone goes, thumbs up, keep going. Or, hey, this thing. And they go, okay. Or, I don't really want to do it that way. And like, you could have, but yes, none of this, let's all go meet at the, blah. No. We don't need to be doing that part.
Right.
There's no point to that part.
Right.
I've had experiences in the past, like this past year, where I had to do like a film skit for one of my Japanese classes. So like, first time I tried to take on too much, and this time I took more of a backseat role, and I think the backseat role really helped.
Yeah, because the way we're going to communicate with them is not at all the way that they are going to receive communication. And so it just then puts everybody in a situation where they feel like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't like that.
Right.
It makes me uncomfortable, and I'm either going to lash out, or I'm going to talk behind somebody's back, or I'm going to shut down, or I'm going to nothing good.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Is what I found.
I had an experience last year where I was in an organization that had a weekly team meeting, and I hated it. It was so bad. And the things that I was working on, or the ideas that I had, were irrelevant to most of the people in the meeting. And so it was the wrong place to do what I'm talking about, of like these snapshots of where I am, so that if people want me to do the thing I'm doing differently, they can tell me that, or we can hash it out. That was not happening. So then I was resentful because this meeting was pointless for me. Like, there was no way for me to work on the thing that would be a contribution, because it's eating into time that I could be working on that, while also telling me explicitly this is not the time to bring it up. I'm like, well, when's the time to bring it up?
Yeah, I feel like the weekly team meetings should be saved for like the higher ups of companies.
Well, you can have team meetings if you're holistic.
The team is all working on the same thing that makes sense for the team to meet.
Yeah.
Right. Concepts are particularly stupid because that's not how work is.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean
in charge
to
of it.
come off as like.
No, I'm a teacher, and I get particularly incensed about certain educational topics that my fellow educators are not handling properly in my brain.
Cool.
So
I like teachers.
So that's why I sound like irritated. Is it just like, God, Jesus Christ, education, get your shit together?
Yeah, I feel that way too, and I'm, like, not a teacher, but a student. But like, my sympathy goes out to you and all the struggles teachers like go through all the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, you're at work. My boss gives me a project to do, right? Or puts me on a team to do a project. Well, somebody's always in charge of stuff. People have been, hired based on like, this is what I'm good at, or this is what I'm good at, or blah, blah, blah. Like, there is a defined hierarchy at a job that doesn't occur in a class. And it facilitates the doing of the project. And a lot of what happens is kids are not allowed to. And we've talked about this before, like, be really specific in what they want to do.
Yes.
And get really good at one thing.
Yes.
And that is a problem, I think.
Wait, they're not allowed to do what?
They very rarely is there. There's a very big push and a very big thing about kids being exposed to lots of things, but not getting very good at any of them, as opposed to getting really good at something that they seem to enjoy and have an aptitude for.
Yes.
Yeah, and like, especially in a project, I'm sorry, but if it's let's go write a paper project, like, I need to be in charge of that project. I'm just really good at it, right? But if our project is a video, like, I'll just do it. Don't just let the kid who knows what he's doing do it, and then tell me, I don't know, where he needs help. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, and that then I think builds leadership in the kid that is very good at it, like, exposes the other kids to that form of expression, right? And maybe they didn't want to get better at it, but like, trying to pretend that everybody is, I don't know, should be able to do everything, that just doesn't make any sense to me, right? Like, why do certain kids need to learn about like gas laws in chemistry? They don't. Let's be real honest. They don't. I don't remember them. And I am a perfectly capable adult.
A bit of a speculation now that you mentioned this, because in regards to children, right, isn't it that the schooling system in most of the Western countries was originally developed in order to train people to become factory workers, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost as though throwing lots of information that can be sort of miscellaneous, like, could it have the effect of like killing intellectual curiosity in the long term because of fatigue, and because of sort of like instilling a lot of boredom as well through things that somebody's not interested in, which it also trains them to then be able to keep up with boring tasks at a specific job, like in a factory or at an office or whatever, because we can't all as they would say, we can't all do the things that we'd like to do, that we'd like to specialize in.
Sure, and that may be, I think, like a great side bonus for capitalism.
Right.
But I think in a lot of ways, education was also just meant to like, hey, you have to be at this place for 8
Yes,
hours a day,
that part. Yes.
all day. And you
Yes.
have to listen to these people and you have to do what they tell you to do. And also, we need it to be this long because that's how long we need your parents to be at our factory.
Right.
And we can't employ you anymore, unfortunately, child. And so I think that's something that gets lost in education is like it really was built in large part based around what adults and parents, like how long they were expected to be gone and how
Yes.
long companies needed childcare for that they didn't want to pay for. And when you do that, it's hard to fill a whole day, right, without a bunch of random shit.
Yeah, this is the whole thing.
To be quite honest, that's what electives are for.
Yeah, never assume that something is malice when it could be incompetence. Like, I think most of our system, it wasn't really like a little guy with the mustachio twirling it, figuring out how to get as much monopoly money as possible. They're not that smart, okay? But what happened was,
although that is a great side benefit.
Like, absolutely.
I think what you're saying makes total sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll encourage certain aspects of it to be iterated on more than others, but there isn't like a deep understanding or construction behind it. It's very ad hoc.
Yeah.
And so that there's that, but also this is why some like the critiques of capitalism are kind of, in my opinion, silly, and missing the point entirely, which is that what Lauren's saying, you have to let people specialize. You should not only let them, but do everything in your power for people to follow what they're interested in or to work on what they're interested in, even when they are bad at it for some reason, because the people that have a disability or something that holds them back, when they really have the passion to push through and to keep working on something, to persist, give you more information about the methodology of teaching for whatever that skill is, right? So the people that are outliers, either extremely talented and capable or extremely untalented, but their capabilities improve, yes, as you give them different approaches, gives you a fuller body of knowledge of how that field can recruit. So we have fields that don't know how to recruit, is what's happened now, and that's the problem.
Or those people figure out a way to make your process more efficient and therefore more profitable.
I think it's also maybe like a class-related issue. I mean, or just say that it's maybe related to classism, because I think education, right, in certain sense of the word before the factory model came in, used to be in the purview of the upper class, right? Because it was a matter of resources and who could afford like the proper tutoring and to go to university back in the day. So maybe, oh God, this is embarrassing. When you have a moment where we're going to start with a point and your memory just blanks. Yeah.
Well, we still continue to do that is the thing. It's why a college degree doesn't mean as much anymore. Or a bachelor's means almost, doesn't mean the same thing it used to.
Yeah, so I thought it was a class issue because in some ways, if people are allowed, if we give, let's say, more resources to people who are, let's say, in quote unquote, more impoverished classes, and then they might have more power, more education to be able to choose to put forward better models that, may clash against those who have the, sort of like the monopolies around different sectors of life, then it gives me the feeling that they're not kind of incentivized to, get people as educated as possible.
Well, just make education less useful.
Yeah.
And then that's what happened after we had to let women in, after we had to let people of color into college, right? That's when you saw a decline in the earning power of education. That's what we did. We just made it a master's degree, a PhD, this particular college so that you could network correctly. Like we will find any way under the sun to make sure that the people in power stay in power, no matter how hard anybody else tries to fix it. That's what I've come to believe.
Right. And you just have to realize in some ways degrees nowadays, or a lot of it is, it's almost like a lot of people go to university, But I always kind of got the feeling that some people who come out with some degrees, like the ones that I've had in my legal course day, right? Right, they were chasing signs of being educated, and they were signaling that out to the world, but they weren't necessarily like, they didn't know, you could say, like what education actually is, what it means to learn something per se, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like a high school diploma doesn't mean shit anymore.
I mean,
at
so far
all.
as in university as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
I want to note too, so the upper classes, I agree with the class analysis, and I think this breaks down to one very basic physical property, which is time. So if you have a lot of time to work on something, that's going to get you further than if you don't. Then it's a matter of like the methodology of how you're spending that time. That can always be improved on. But the reason why the upper classes were able to have these like somewhat appreciable hierarchy of skill was because of how much time they put into it. But they mostly wanted to have an excuse for why they were better than other people. So it wasn't intrinsically motivated, if we put it that way. It was extrinsically motivated. So they weren't really interested in doing things that create fields that are maximally able to advance and progress and include brilliant minds. That's not what they wanted. They were looking for exclusion. They were looking to make an inner ring, and then that inner ring explains why they get to have all the money and make all the decisions. Get to be special
because
people.
Obviously they're smarter because they figured out a way to make the most money, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
And they wanted to, I've become more and more, I would say, I don't know, what's the word? What's that word?
Cynical?
You know what I'm talking about. Cynical. Jaded.
Yeah. Disillusioned. Yeah.
I've become very jaded in regards to education. The longer I have been in the field. It doesn't mean all that much, to be quite honest. It's not that big of a deal. Any of it. At least in America. I will say I do not have any knowledge outside of my own country, and I don't want to speak to systems I don't know anything about. But in America, it doesn't mean anything really.
Right. So. Right. And
it means you can learn, because you learn what your professor wants, what their thought is on the subject, and then you parrot it back to them, and then you win.
I had a thought, because getting into like the disillusionment part is important, and I'm kind of at that point as well. But it's weird because it's kind of like a very small number of people are messing up everything for everyone, because they're controlling structures and they're controlling institutions. So the institutions are just going to bend to a very simple heuristic. And maybe then if we can notice the heuristic that is driving all of this, we can just attack the heuristic and offer a counter heuristic, a better heuristic. I think the heuristic they're using is that superior people should run the planet. We are superior people because we already are in that position of running the planet. Which is crazy. Like
crazy.
What it should be is structures and institutions that enable people to develop competency should be the focal points of human civilization. And if you'll look at any of our institutions right now, it's much more about the people who see themselves at the top of a hierarchy, which lets you know what the institutions are built to do. Like, they're built to and instructed to, in many ways, make sure the person at the top of the hierarchy thinks that that is justified. That's it. Now, the disillusionment, like, I don't want to participate in that. I want to do something about it. But I also I don't know. This is where I get kind of stuck myself. And I think like the smarter you are as someone who's yeah, it's really difficult as you look at this over time. Like I feel a sort of anger because I think the heuristic that I'm proposing that would be able to defeat this heuristic of we are special people and all institutions are epithets to our specialness. The alternative is that institutions are how we can make sure that people can develop into the most intelligent, balanced, inventive, creative, impactful, helpful. Institutions are meant to make people capable of reaching that, even in ways that we can't imagine today, right? That's what I wanted, and I still feel anger that heuristic is sometimes sold as the actual institutions that we have. It's not the institutions that we have.
That's my thing, is that I've just stopped. I'm extremely jaded and cynical about our current, this idea that like education is broken. No, it's not broken. It's doing exactly what it was meant to do. And that's the problem. Like if we want to do something like fix things and have things be equitable and have things be in any way better, this system, it cannot continue, is my point. Mm-hmm. This system completely is fucked.
Yeah. Yep.
Because it was always fucked, not because we somehow fucked it up.
Right.
It's always been that way.
Right. And I think if you have a certain amount of like intellectual horsepower coupled with good literacy, like very good literacy, what people will use as a smokescreen to say like, no, these institutions really do develop people up to their potential and thereby develop fields up to their potential. When they say that, they also say, and here's some obfuscation, and here's some, esoteric equivocation, to use a bunch of big words, which I know how to use. So they'll use these ways of speaking that are supposed to make you feel stupid. And really, you can't see how magnificent the emperor's robes really are. You just are too
it's
stupid.
Your fault.
Yeah.
Right. Your eyes just don't work.
Yeah.
That's kind of a funny thought to me. Maybe the autism kind of helps, where it's just if they were ever to do that, I'd be like, well, what do the words mean? Tell me about it. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm oblivious to to my ignorance and my stupidity, perhaps. I don't know.
I think we ask way too many questions.
Yeah. Right.
Because we want to understand, we seek to understand and be understood.
Yes.
It's one of our, I think, main motivations.
Yeah. And I think that's like a very human thing as well. And we can't give people the benefit of the doubt based on hierarchy because we don't really see it. We can kind of see it, like we can conceptualize it. Like I understand that in theory I'm supposed to be like, oh, Elon Musk is different than me. Oh, what's his duck is different than me. But then if you have me ask why, I'm like, oh, well, they're put into environments that are radically different than mine and have the ability to coerce people into doing things. I don't have the ability to coerce people into doing things, and I don't exist in a lineage of coercion that they live in where they have a different set of norms based on that. Done.
Done. But are they better than me in any way? What? Obviously not.
Yeah, and possibly quite a bit worse. Like these don't seem to be people that I have any confidence I can trust to have the power and authority over what happens to all people. They shouldn't have that, and they do. Period. Like they're so the whole thing is the heuristic is justify why they can do that. Or obfuscate that they can do that. Oh, they really can't do that. You're just complaining. They don't think about it too much.
Well, they don't have control over that in my particular life. Okay, well, anecdotal Evidence isn't evident. I don't know what to tell you.
Right. Yeah. So getting back to Bruce Lee. Okay, philosophy of self and self-expression. So the one thing that's important is that though our unit of humanity that we are, like I'm a singular unit of humanity. I'm independent and interdependent. It's weird. I'm influenced by my environment. I change the environment, it changes me. This is kind of what's going on. But my body, my brain cannot be made to conform to an ideology. The ideology is either descriptive or it is wrong. That's it. So there's some freedom in that, because then you can find forms of self-expression that are inside of your body. And even if somebody tries to interpret it, and this includes autism because it makes our bodies move funny, if people are going to interpret it according to some dogma, some ideology, it's either descriptive or wrong. And it's probably wrong. So you get to exist in something that is real, even if it can't be described, which is cool.
You really can't. We've tried so much.
So
Pretty cool, though.
Yeah, right? Like, so then
I was just gonna say,
Go ahead.
yeah, you can set the rules for your own existence.
Yeah.
That's the benefit of being human.
If you reject ideological models and then you just start experimenting with your body safely, like try to find the parameters that most definitely, as far as we can tell, are safe to stay inside of. Don't do things that are going to hurt you as best you can. Now you can start to like have your own connection to what is real, even if it's not described. And for autistic people, I think that's maybe the healthiest response, is to do like physical things so that you assert that your heuristic is and will always be, I want to know what's true. Instead of me generating yet another reason why it's okay for things that I have always seen as destructive and are not true to continue to be. I'm not going to excuse them. Let's put it that way, okay? But I need a break from them. And I think our bodies are the break from them. Or ourselves.
I have such a hard time
go ahead.
Being in my body.
Yeah.
I have such a hard time being in my body.
Right.
It is. And I thought about this the other day because I've been feeling really just physically uncomfortable, just that like I want to jump out of my skin kind of feeling, you know?
Yeah.
A lot. And how that keeps me separate from my body, like does make my emotional space so much worse. And it's really just because my body is painful to me. Like that idea that my body is painful to me is emotionally so painful. And I don't think we focus on that at all.
Yes.
We, you know, in fact, in some, you know, religions and philosophies or whatever, the point is to separate from your body, you know. Mm-hmm. But whenever I feel like I am in touch with my body, it's like what my body needs is so different and quote unquote weird that it can't be met in that environment.
Yeah. Yes.
And so then I disconnect.
Yes.
And it's hard to go to ping pong like that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think a big maybe reason for that is perhaps, you know, the pace of the world that we live in, right? And the environment that's set is often simply too quick to be able to recalibrate your body to how your mind needs to, you know, to the speed that your mind processes things in some ways in order to survive, right? It conjured up a line from the Star Wars series Andor. I don't know if any of you guys have watched it, but think that there was a line like the pace of oppression outstrips our ability to even be able to perceive it. So like I think a lot of stuff happens all the time, and like like lots of negative things too that can sometimes put into doubt our wish to just sit down, right? We think it may not be safe, and I think if you do that, if that happens to you long enough, then you just lose touch of the body, right? You disconnect either because of dissociation or because of the being socialized and incentivized to always meet certain unrelenting standards, right? To sort of do specific tasks and goals. But then if you can sit down and appreciate sort of like the smaller things, the joys of being alive, I think like Tim Fletcher mentioned, like the 12 different human needs, then yeah, you're basically you're going to have this sort of like dissonance between your body and mind, which I think is what you're describing.
So
it's wild.
I think it's a dissonance between yourself and a model of yourself that you're being told. You're okay, I don't think you're actually disassociating from your body. I think what you're trying to do is not apply a model to yourself that is wrong about your body, because the way that people describe the body and explain it directly or even through inference, like the images that we see about human bodies, is clearly wrong. So if that's
for
the
me,
only,
yes,
yeah,
well,
I think it's wrong for everyone. I do move my body a lot. I have done a lot. So I think what people believe about their body is deeply, deeply wrong. And if you start to apply that to yourself, it's almost like you're breaking the heuristics that you're supposed to find about like taking care of yourself. Your brain's job is to regulate the metabolic needs of your body. Not to think, to regulate the needs.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Does this is this a similar principle to like when trans people feel uncomfortable in their bodies? Could you say that this is similar to that? Just like the whole like rejecting the wrong. I don't know if I'm describing it well because I haven't had that experience.
We do not know what that is. We do not. I wouldn't want to speculate on it. And we're also no, you're fine.
I didn't want to ask an insensitive question on purpose.
No, it's not insensitive at all. I think this is an important thing because we also don't question it, because there's already been people who have made conclusive statements on that, but we don't understand why we have psychological responses to our body, various psychological responses. That is to say, like we form states of distress over our body. We call it things like dysphoria or dysmorphia. So that's like the category that psychology talks about. But no, we don't know what that is. That's not. That is, you can get people that are like ideologically going to state that they know why that is, but no, we don't know. Like, for example, autistic people are much more likely to have eating disorders, and that seems to stem from some of our behavior around food, which has to do with meeting our metabolic needs, but it also seems that the culture will guide you into different directions as well of how you're going to interpret things that are going wrong with you. And like, for example, I have sensory problems with a lot of clothing, and I've had the experience of being very skinny with ballet and also like following rigidly a food plan that was given to me by a sports nutritionist who later on didn't like how well his own plan worked, So I've been really skinny. It felt a lot better because the tactile kinetic sensations from my clothing was not as distracting. So I can come up with reasons for that. So it's okay. So let's like pull it into like a category of things. So I was saying that we have an idea of our body as belonging to our culture and not a thing that culture is merely attempting to describe. Like, culture tries to describe what we are. And the two things that culture can do is be descriptive or be wrong. And I would say overwhelmingly, there is no reason for us to have faith that it's being descriptive yet. It's wrong about so very much. So it's probably anything that our culture does say about that is probably wrong. and I don't know what it is. And so but I will say that okay, let me try to position this. Where do I stand
I
on
will
this?
say I feel like wrong having a body. Like, I don't feel like I should have one, but I don't feel like the one I have is wrong, and I don't know what that would feel like. So I don't want to compare those two things.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry again.
No, don't apologize. You're totally fine. Yeah, there's too much. People are way too sensitive about asking questions like this, and you're fine. I just want to emphasize, even for the sake of what's currently happening, that we don't have normal people, quote unquote normal people that don't fall into any category of psychiatric or difference to culture. There's nothing neurologically unique about them. There's nothing physically unique about them. Nothing has become a disability. Yeah, they're just moving about. Those people don't have a model of the human entity that's accurate yet, right? So when you get more complex people where they diverge from normal, we don't have anything to go off of. We can't say, unlike those people who totally have an accurate model of people, we are like this. We don't have an explanation of human behavior that is sufficient. I am proposing one explanation of human behavior, that I think that our brains are meant to just figure out how to take care of ourselves when we have basic metabolic needs popping off. And I think that we can interpret that via culture. And our culture keeps giving us different interpretations. And so you may see explosions in behavior based on what culture says your metabolic signals mean. And some of the stuff that we feel about our body may just also be that. And by some, I probably think all of it is, but to be a little bit more, I guess, less dogmatic myself, I'll say, well, maybe there's more explanations. But does that kind of make sense? I think we have...
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, we have an interpretation that we're making at all times based on what society gives us as models.
And you said something about eating disorders related to autism.
Yep.
I have a personal question about that, just a small thing.
Sure.
Is it binge eating and the other kind of eating disorder? Is both?
All of them. We have higher incidence of binge eating disorder, anorexia, bulimia, something called orthorexia, where you become the correct macro and micronutrients. It's like orthorexia is an obsession with correct eating. All of them.
Also, I can't hear you, Jane.
Oh, so I was saying, sorry, my mic may cut out when I go certain places. So we have an increase in bulimia, anorexia, binge eating disorder. So all of those, and you can have one person who has all of them at different times. We have a higher incidence of disordered eating that's outside of that. We have higher incidence of what they've called ARFIB, I think it's, is that what
ARFIB?
Yeah, it's ARFIB.
Yeah, we have higher incidence of that. And we also have more problems with orthorexia, where you find a correct way to eat. So people that are fixated on macro and micronutrients being exactly right. So we have, and I personally think that has to do with how we perceive the world, that I don't think we arrive at eating. I don't think we get the same reward from eating as a typical person. I think that our visual spatial impairment is so significant and fundamental that even the idea of walking to food, eating food, doesn't give us the reward. So it's different. So I think go ahead.
Say, for example, for me, I'm someone who likes to eat and read, or eat and watch YouTube videos.
Mm-hmm.
The reward for me comes from eating with the entertainment rather than just eating. If I'm eating at a restaurant, even then I still consider that entertainment rather than just eating, I guess. So you know,
you're trying to give yourself a bigger reward, and I think that's probably because we don't get, I think, and again, we need more studies on this, but from what I've understood so far in my own model, what I would propose is that we don't get the reward that people get from anticipating and then going to get a meal.
I also wonder, since what you just said, Jane, sorry, it's if it's also like culturally compounded, because in our cultures, it's not the value of being cooking, of enjoying specific meals, and I even say because of the consumerist further individualism that's led to the erosion of communities, right? There's also less of like a communal kind of gathering together, and then us eating and maybe doing other kind of, let's say, like low stimulation activities, because there's been the opposite of that in the last few decades.
Mm-hmm.
It's led to an increase in these eating disorders, for instance, right? And then there's like, it's a reason why they're also tied to anxiety, meaning that all of these things are affecting the nervous system directly, right? It's nervous system issues, it seems to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's nervous system, and I again think it's like regulatory. So let's say, for example, that autistic people haven't considered that not only is it like signals from their stomach, or like, basically like rumbling in their stomach and emptiness in the stomach, maybe feeling lightheaded. So they say that we have what is it? Sorry, alexithymia or alexithymia, however you want to say it. So we're not supposed to understand the cues from our body. But what if autistic people didn't realize that not only is it these physical cues from their stomach, but also these doing as arriving cues that are helping them to know when they're hungry and when they need to eat and when they're full, like that we are missing some of the signals that they typically use to navigate when and where they should be eating. And so it's possible that autistic people may be having a different kind of eating disorder. Well, I think almost it's certainly autistic people's eating disorders are actually very different than autistic people's eating disorders. Even though we're in an environment that I don't think is good for any of us, I think it's making it worse for everybody. But I think that there's something different about autistic people's embodiment and our perception of our embodiment. That means that when autistic people say a concept that they think will include us, it actually doesn't, because we are missing for our entire lives something that was developmentally entwined, inseparable, right? So I don't even think I'm experiencing hunger like a neurotypical person when I do, or the desire or need to fuel myself. And that I would argue one way to address eating disorders in autistic people is to tell us that, when you eat, your body is able to build, because we're interested in building things. So our bodies, we cannot actually build our bodies. Our bodies build themselves. We can try to support and even alter the way that our body has access to building, but we don't have a thick understanding of that. We kind of noodle around with things and like, if we put this medication in this person, it seems to fix that behavior. Great. But do we know why antidepressants work? We still don't really. You know what I mean? So we can alter aspects of how our body builds, but we actually don't have control over that whatsoever. And for autistic people, if we framed it more like that, because we don't, I think, arrive at food and get like, yay, I'm moving to food, yay, I'm moving to food, yay, I'm moving to food, yay. We don't understand these concepts people are using, even though we have other physiological things that are not changed by our autism, or shall I say, don't have this huge divergence. But I think the divergences that we have are in systems that are completely integrated in a neurotypical person. So that's the problem that we need to address. And I think that's why I'm getting back to this idea that I think it would be very therapeutic for autistic people to get to observe the building process of their own body and see ourselves as that's our friend. That's like our friend, the builder, right. Our body, who's much like us.
You just gave me an idea, or rather, like, I think what's very important is, like, if you're on the spectrum, right, if you feel it in your bones, as it were, it's almost like I feel like I've lost a lot of time in my own life trying to fix some of my issues, trying out different fixes from like a neurotypical perspective or a source, right? For eating issues, for nutrition, for sleep, what have you. And it's just not always worked. And I think, yeah, I've always had this difficulty of just being able to start from scratch, from a place of like, okay, I'm going to try to kind of figure out how to make, I don't know, eating a meal enjoyable in my own way. How do I make it a fun and interactive experience, right? That's actually meaningful somehow. And then how can I sort of mix it around here and there to also get my nutritional needs met at the same time? Yeah, because nobody tells you these answers, it seems, right? And then on top of that, I think I've heard a word related to this, interoception, that I think we have interoception issues where they may be completely different. So that is something else that we'd have to trial and error individually, I think, as well, on top of the neurodivergent
Yeah,
process too.
yeah, and I think that our interoception, I think it's different because of it being absent or much more absent of the model of doing as arriving.
What is interoception?
So interoception is the sense of your internal organs and processes. So like you may have like an interoceptive feeling of your intestines.
Right. So I think that, like, to give you an example, this is tied to, right, why autistic individuals may be hypo or hypersensitive to certain stimuli, because perhaps they're a regulatory process, let's say around temperature, right, for the body's control. Maybe somebody doesn't sense it at a high temperature, right? And maybe they're a bit more resistant when it gets hotter, or the opposite way around. And you can apply that to lots of things. Yeah.
So, like, if you're someone who likes to take hot showers, for example, you just have a higher tolerance for the heat than, someone else?
Well, you see, it's not even necessarily, it might not actually be a tolerance. It may, potentially damage you as much as anyone else, but it's just that it's like your body's detection system for a specific criteria, if you will, just isn't working perhaps in some way. Or it can be the opposite thing, where it's way too attuned and it's way too sensitive to something.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna
I could be
chime
getting
in
it
here.
wrong. I could be
Yeah,
getting it wrong. Yeah,
no,
sorry.
I'll chime in. I think that model's interesting, but I would like pivot it slightly to say, so interoception gives you a chance to notice changes in your body. So changes in states internally from innervation in your body, and also feelings of like pressure, heat perception. It could be anything that because even like in so much as like you can feel heat on your skin, and we would call that more like of a tactile sense. But once you start to notice it changing the tissues, like your soft tissue and your muscles, because when things are warmer, they move differently, right? So insofar as you're able to notice the change, that's the skill. And maybe for autistic people, we may have that altered because noticing those changes has been positively or negatively reinforced. We may be lacking language to talk about it because those changes, the way we're experiencing them, don't sound like an holistic person's description of their interoception. So I think it's a skill that we can cultivate, and that you still are working with like what your brain is able to do with its ability to perceive change and interpret those changes. And that's weird, but that's also why I think this topic is of relevance when I'm like, okay, let's talk about Bruce Lee and expression of the body, self-expression, and even like emotional expression, all these things that we categorize in an holistic way, about like what our body needs and what state our body currently is, like we're trying to communicate that. And I don't know if somebody's like actually overly sensitive or undersensitive. I think that we don't have enough confidence to stay with it and to try to make those discernments, that autistic people are kind of like trying to pay attention to other signals besides interoception, because it's too confusing with the language that we've been given to work with it. And also that our bodies may be in very uncomfortable states a lot of the time because people aren't listening to the problems that we're having and taking them seriously. Like we can be called hypochondriacs. So there's just a lot going on there that isn't fully explored. So I before we say like we're too much this, we're too little that, I would just say that we aren't even allowed the luxury to decide what we think it means, right? Like we're supposed to not be able to do that, which I find wrong. Especially like I stretch doctors, and they don't know more about how to interpret their own body's cues.
That's very well said, Jane. That's actually, yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
It's like, it just made me think of, yeah, right. It made me think that in some ways, it's not even necessarily like a lack of certain bodily systems, right? Because when, even things, one's environment, trauma, factors like this can throw you completely out of the loop with trying to, go through the experience of sort of like knowing your body's limitations, what it can do, how it feels, how it responds to different stimuli. And like you said, we just sort of like, I guess it can be easy to leverage some of the mental processes to compensate for that, right? To kind of mimic or mask through neurotypical kind of ideas or whatever, or sort of like models, I should say. And so it must be very scary, like I'm finding it right now, to sort of try to go against that, conditioning that kind of came out from a place of survival. Because, like, I can give like just a very brief personal example. I find that in some ways I'm a lot more energetic in terms of my needs. I've got a lot more sort of like bodily movement needs than I've always thought or I've always been told. But then you've not been sort of like told or had the resources to be able to experiment with that, experience that, and then maybe carry sort of like as well as these shames or fears that if you do so, it's going to, ostracize you in some kind of way. Unless you think or you feel that you're not going to be even able to meet any of your needs, then in that case. So what do you do in that kind of situation?
Right. Yeah. Right. And then to take this a couple steps further, so different parts of your body, different kinds of tissue have different levels of innervation. Oh my gosh, anxiety tonight. Thank you. Oh, we got a raid. I never get raids. Oh, that's so exciting.
Oh, who?
Oh, thank you so much.
Nice to see you, Raiders.
Hello. So,
what's this? The Vikings are raiding us?
Yeah, we've been raided. Anxiety Tonight, which has one of the best possible names. Hello. So we're talking about Bruce Lee's philosophy of self and self-expression and autistic minds, because I had this very weird situation yesterday where I ended up giving Bruce Lee's sister a ride up a few blocks because she was injured. And I did not know that was who I was giving a ride.
I missed that entire discussion. I want to hear more about that.
It was insane. I went to get coffee, and I guess some punks had knocked her and another older woman down and just kind of went going. I think they were on like electric scooter. I don't know. But she's a little old lady, and she asked if I could give her a ride up the street. And I was like, I don't know, because my car is so messy. I had to move everything in my car. I had to apologize for the bottles of like energy drinks on the floor. And then I drove her up, and I was like, what's your name? She goes, Phoebe Lee. I was like, Phoebe. And she has a thicker accent, so I was like trying to follow it. And she's like, look me up. I am Bruce Lee's sister. And then I like held back the need to immediately start crying, because Bruce Lee is many people's hero, including me. And so, yeah, that happened.
Then I'll have a thing to tell you later in a DM. That might be fun for you to do.
Yeah, that would be cool. Anyways, so then I like, had some meltdowns for the rest of the day. Yeah, it was crazy. It was absolutely bonkers.
I know. Very cool. Anxiety Tonight is saying that it is very cool as well.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, let's revisit some things about Bruce Lee. And for context, I used to say, I was on my Facebook for a long time, like I want to be the Bruce Lee of ballet, because I did ballet, like pretty seriously, very seriously. But I started late, so I had like a more limited career, but I still got to do quite a bit, and I still do things in movement arts, and I've studied a whole bunch of movement arts. So my special interest was ballet, and that quickly expanded into moving the human body and understanding how the body actually exists. And I think that we just got into some weeds here, but I think that autism is a really good candidate for doing movement skills as a way to help us create our own language of like what our needs are, because we have
Okay,
differences in our interoception, et cetera, and so forth. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. Does anybody who's rated have any background in movement or questions around that? I currently work as something called the flexologist. I stretch people.
I hope they don't stretch you too much.
Wait, Jane, I have a question for you. I guess there maybe as some physical advice. You see, sometimes when you're stood like up, you know, on your feet for like long periods of time, and maybe if you're not necessarily used to that, and you get some pains in the lower back. I'm wondering if that's tied with the psoas muscle. I
Yes.
hear it's called, right?
Yes,
and
almost
then it's
always.
usually not very, yeah, and it's not very like well exercised by a lot of people. Do you have any specific exercises that you recommend?
Yes, I do. I have 3 things to recommend. Thing number 1, almost always these are going to come together because we've been stuck in chairs since we were kids, which was not a great plan as it turns out. So for example, the natural curves of the spine are exaggerated. So what people coming out of medical schools and like kinesiology, they believe that the natural curves of the spine are much more dramatic than they really are, because they were studying to get those natural curves cadavers that had lived their whole lives sitting in chairs. So problem 1 is the natural curves of your spine have been exaggerated, specifically the curve in your thoracic spine. So people's spines pump backwards in space, so you're collapsing the ribs in the front and opening them in the back, and that's going to put pressure into the lower back and also change the orientation of your psoas. Your psoas is a hip flexor. It is the only muscle that connects your upper body and your legs. It's a very deep hip flexor. There's some more superficial hip flexors as well. But what it hopefully is doing, and it looks like a ribbon, it stabilizes your spine while also allowing your femur to articulate at the joint, right? So if you didn't have something stabilizing your spine and ultimately your pelvis, because your spine connects into your pelvis through the sacrum, you wouldn't be able to locomote because you would basically just fall. So it's isolation of the femur from the torso. That's part of what it does. But if you keep sitting, you already change the curve of the spine, and it usually is going to fall into the same position, and it also dumps the thoracic spine forward. So there's 2 things you would want to focus on, one being the thoracic, also psoas at the same time. The psoas, the best way to deal with it is to do something called a release, which is the psoas usually is hypertonic. When muscles are hypertonic, they are grabbing. A muscle cannot grab all the time. It will eventually, you can think of it like lights, it will eventually turn off because it runs out of electricity, runs out of power in this metaphor. But what you'll have is a popcorning. And then your body gets used to doing this all the time, where some of them turn on, and then when they get tired, other ones turn on, and the muscle never turns off. Right? So the problem with this, with your psoas, the psoas, because it's this ribbon-like shape, it can twist your pelvis, your ribs, and then it will just stay twisted. So the alignment of your shoulders and your hips, you should be able to move them pretty freely, independently, as much as your spine allows. But what you'll have is people try to do movements when their shoulders and hips are already catawonky. This can also be partly scoliosis, so I just want to note that as well, but you can still get release of the psoas even if you have something like scoliosis, where you're never going to get the symmetry of your shoulders and hips. So a release looks like lying on a lacrosse ball, and you want the lacrosse ball to be able to sink in past where the pelvic crest is, so that the ilium, the iliacus, the pokey part, when people were wearing low-rise pants and it looked atrocious, that's the bone that was sticking out. So you want to go above that and be able to lie down on something solid that you can let your soft tissues, your fascia spread until it's potentially touching or at least putting pressure on the psoas and maybe the iliacus, which is the muscle inside of the pelvic bone, the ilium. So you're trying to hit the iliacus if possible, but definitely the psoas by just breathing into it. And the reason you want to do that, if you can even try this, like flex a muscle that you're good at flexing and poke it, and then you're suddenly much more aware that it's being activated. So it's the same principle. So you engage the muscle, you have something touching it, so that you're getting tactile feedback that, oh, this is engaged. And over time, you can figure out how to relax it around that tactile support. Mm-hmm. So you want to do psoas release.
I think I've seen also online that I got to be careful with a psoas release because you don't want to do it at a specific point where it might be harmful. I think like with a little crossbow or whatever.
Yeah, if you go to the point that I'm telling you where it's higher, what they're trying to avoid is an artery, but that's actually closer to your hip socket. So you don't have to go, and so the psoas gets skinnier as it goes down towards your legs, and there's a little knob on the inside of your femur. So there's the lesser trochanter and the greater trochanter. The greater trochanter is on the outside, and people kind of know where that is. You can kind of feel it. It's bony. So the lesser one is the one on the inside. That's what it goes down to attach to. And if you try, you wouldn't want to release those fibers anyway, because that's less of the issue. I mean, you could do some light release by tractioning and stretching, but I wouldn't do pounding around there because you can compress some blood supply. So that's what they're trying to avoid you doing in general. But if you go higher, it's not going to hit that.
How long do you have to do this release?
So in general, like you do want to get practice it regularly, so you can start to feel your capacity for letting it go happen sooner. I'd say when you're first doing it, it's like ramping up. So start with like 1 or 2 minutes on each side. One side will typically be more of an issue, and that's usually going to directly relate to your back pain, the side that has more issues. And then maybe work up to like 2 to 3 minutes as a maximum, and then you can work your way to a maintenance place. So you want to like extend your ability to be relaxed on top of it, and then eventually what you want is to get on top of it and it immediately relaxes, so that you only need to do it for like 30 seconds to a minute. That's my opinion on it. You'll find some differences of opinion too.
There was a video that I found on, like, I can't remember it was like a channel that does like lots of fitness stuff, right? I kind of found it funny that they even sort of said that for most people, like their gait is, not wrong per se, but it's just not the most optimal, right? The way that you walk, it's not the most energy conserving either.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not the most helpful for your postural muscles. So you have deep red muscle fibers that are very close to your bone, especially your spine. And the best thing that these muscles are doing for you is resisting the pull of gravity down. As the day goes on, you actually get shorter because gravity is winning, and it's compressing your spine and a couple other aspects of your bony anatomy that have some squish to them get pushed together, right? So what your postural muscles are supposed to do when they're really strong is elongate and then give you kind of like how a tent has like the pole in that would be in the center for some tents, or like a teepee or something. It gives you this like horizontal vertical extension, so that your body can let go of superficial muscles, instead of what happens instead, or the alternative is, if your postural muscles aren't strong, the more superficial muscles just lock onto your joints, and then you're kind of like shoving this shape through space instead of swinging your joints out. Like your arms and legs should be swinging away from your plumb line or the vertical line of your postural muscles. So it gets complicated. Okay, the other thing too is you want to strengthen, it's kind of like rhomboids, but it's a couple other muscles too, including postural muscles in your thoracic region, so between your shoulder blades. And I also recommend thoracic mobilization. So that would be, you can take 2 lacrosse balls, throw them in a sock, put that underneath your back anywhere from like a couple, maybe an inch below the base of the skull to, how do I explain this part? Hold on, let me think about it. A couple inches above where your belly button is. So anywhere on your back, and you would go like you would in a crunch position. And what you would do is bring your hands behind your head, just lay back on it, bring your elbows in towards your face, and that's going to keep your shoulders out of this motion. And then you just articulate your ribs forward into a crunch. You keep the elbows in, extend it open, and then at the very end you can open the arms to add weight. And then you can do that on more and more of a platform. So you can do that over a block, a foam block, a half roller, a roller. I like blocks personally because they're a little more stable. If you wanted to add the lacrosse balls, sometimes you can get one that's already joined. It's called a peanut. So you can get like 2 blocks up, 3 blocks up, and then you're learning how to do thoracic mobility. In fact, I'm going to throw something on the screen I was looking at recently. It happens to be right here. So here, if you look at the screen for the stream, cervical flexion, thoracic.
Oh, for the stream, you say?
Yeah.
Do you mind? Would you be able to share your screen here on Discord?
Yeah, I'll just share it. Yeah, it's really, really super simple, but I just want you to see.
Okay, yeah. Thoracic spine, range of motion.
So part of why the psoas is overworking has to do with the thoracic being too curved forward in space.
I suppose actually I'm kind of happy that some of my other habits, at least, are not so bad, where I naturally sleep on my back. And then I've got like all of my chairing is orthopedic as well. Like it's the type that kind of forces you to sit, but then still it's I still have issues. And then actually, I'm not sure if you know about this. Sometimes I get random pains in my neck, right? And it just happens sharply and suddenly to the point that I can't turn my neck to one side. It takes a while to deal with that. Do you know anything about that?
I do. So there's a couple of causes for that. Typically, it's usually more related to the front, the chest, than the back. It can be a problem like higher up in the base of the skull that's coming from the back, but typically it's more that there's a muscle that goes in towards your collarbone from the neck, and it goes to the back of the skull, and it's related in rotation of your head on its axis. If your head is pulled forward and you try to rotate it, that muscle is already shortened. So if you're trying to rotate it and the muscle is like basically compressed already and contracted, you're fighting it. So if you're trying to rotate your head with the muscles in the front of your spine, instead of there should be rotation coming from the postural muscles I was talking about and a couple muscles that are hanging behind your trapezius. So the thing I would work on is if the head is, which typically does in our society, is doing that forward head, where it's almost like it's sliding off of the top of the spine.
Also like leaning downwards as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have to work on that. I mean, like with a lot of things, but I have been thinking about starting to build up a new regimen as well, and like definitely with the variety of stretches too, because getting old, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Things get drier and stickier. I'm working right now a little bit more on that issue of like when the neck can't rotate fully. And then I need to differentiate like how often it's going to be the muscle imbalance in the front of the neck versus in the back.
Mm-hmm.
I do need to do more research. So if I come back to you suddenly with a big info dump, don't be
Sure.
surprised.
No, I'd appreciate it. And I
Yeah.
appreciate this now today as well. I mean, I just love medical knowledge, to be honest, and just
Yeah.
expanding that stuff. In that video, actually, too, somebody in the comments said that, like, with the psoas, they also recommended two other things. They said walking lunges, doing like 400 meters of that apparently really helped with just like general like anaerobic movement and release, plus like, you know, strengthening the muscle. And then they also said diaphragmatic breathing.
Yes.
Because I think, right, the psoas is connected to the diaphragm, right?
Right. It's right. The diaphragm is just above it, and then depending on how your body is, so it's relying on like the fascial connections to really create a dynamic relationship. So some people it may be a little bit easier to find it, some people a little more difficult, but it pulls the muscle. Like it's going to create traction. So when you're exhaling, there's a different length in the psoas than when you're inhaling.
Oh, actually, that's another thing too. See, now I'm getting all my medical questions, but I'll try not to push too much. It's I think growing up, one thing that I've noticed, which is strange in some ways, like contrary to a lot of people, it seemed as though my inhaling, my breathing in, always almost seemed imperceptible. And even now, it seems as though like my rate of inhalation seems to be a lot less than exhalation. It feels like, or is that just a normal human thing?
It's not
Maybe it's
bad.
not a cause concern.
It's not a bad thing. So the ratio of inhalation to exhalation matters. Your exhalation should be longer than your inhalation, ideally. If your inhalation is longer than your exhalation, that is hyperventilating, definitively. So if your exhalation is taking longer, and just make sure you're not holding your breath, right? So that's another thing, we can kind of freeze our breath. But if it's taking a little bit longer, it actually is signaling to your nervous system that it's time to relax your muscles and that you can recover. So this is signaling to our hearts if we need to be pumping more blood to our extremities in order to fight, you know, run away, etc. Yeah, so the slower exhalation, it mimics the pattern you have when you're in like a restful state.
I see. It's like sometimes I wonder when I do a bit of jogging or running, right? At my level where I can sometimes get out of breath, I just wasn't sure whether that's just, I guess I was wondering whether I'm not breathing right as I should be in order to quote unquote catch my breath, where like I struggle to sort of properly inhale deeply. Like it's quite like a strenuous effort.
Yeah. You may not need to either. Like I learned, I forget what this is called, but there's a way that you can breathe when you're running, and there's support for it, that this has benefits, where you do 2 inhales and then a slow exhale. So it's like you inflate again and then exhale. And also, try that one out. Look that up. I can't recall the name of the technique, but there's stuff like that too, where it's like you can only utilize the oxygen so quickly. And you can also train your lungs to be stronger. And the strength is actually in the release. So if your lungs are very well conditioned, it's not necessarily that the inhalation is that different. I mean, you can get more volume faster, like there's a little bit of that, but more of it is that you can control the exhalation.
I see. Okay. 2 inhales, a slow exhale. It's crazy, like right breathing, right? And I was thinking about some of my friends who are into there's like a community, right? Some of the spiritual communities, when they talk about breatharianism and breath work, right?
Oh yeah.
I always thought some of that stuff is like fringy at best and sometimes nonsensical from what I hear of it, right? They talk about releasing DMT for like doing these like, you know, these routines or whatever. But at the same time, and like I was reading this one book, The Body Keeps the Score, you know, for CPTSD, and they talk about how like just even between the length of inhalation exhalation connects to the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. It was kind of actually a game-changing experience when I was practicing that. And another thing too that somebody in my peer support group said is, if you mimic sobbing, right, the same sort of like the shortness of inhalations in that process, it has a very strong soothing effect, which I think I found to be true from experience. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that
They
makes
didn't
sense
teach
to
you
me.
these things, but it's like they're really kind of useful.
Yeah, exactly. And getting back to that too is, so my theme of the day is that we can take a break from society, which we are going to have to do as autistic people because it's really just not set up in a way that's healthy or safe for us because our disability isn't understood, and how we've come to be so invisible despite the disability isn't understood. So we can't trust our society as much as we would wish we could, right? And not to say that this trust issue isn't more extensive, but we have a specific problem with it that's not anywhere near being addressed for the other reasons that it's a problem for everybody. Okay, so that being said, the refuge is in your body because what society believes about your body is not correct. And that's really good to know. So another thing I would tell people is that pain isn't what people told you it is. Like, your fascia is extremely innervated and wraps around your entire nervous system. So all of your nerves, all of these things that send pain signals, are connected to fascial layers, which you're just beginning to understand now. The New York Times just put out an article last weekend, 2 weekends ago, talking about how we don't understand fascia. So some things are actually fascial pain. Fascia.
What is fascia?
Fascia is a network of connective tissue. Fascia, as far as we understand it, is organized in 3 layers. One layer is actually your fat layer, so your adipose. Subcutaneous fat is actually a fascial layer. It's partly lobule, and it's partly this organized set of fibers. And the organization of the fibers on that layer seems to be very individual, which is fascinating. So you have patterns in different regions of your body, and you have patterns that are unique to yourself. Cool. And then the next layer of fascia, well, to go, it gets a little bit weird, but we think of the layer of fascia around the muscles a lot, and we sometimes will describe it as like a lot of baggies. It's like your body has little Ziploc bags that hold everything. So like the muscle fibers have a little baggie around them. If you go down layers, then the muscle fibrils have little baggies around them. If you go up, then the muscle group has a baggie around it. So it's this like nesting doll of little baggies. So that's one issue with fascia. And then there's like this super deep level of fascia that's getting into like the deep red muscle fibers in your skeleton. Okay, so there's all these different layers. Generally, they'll say
so
it gets.
So I was
go ahead.
Yeah. Understanding correctly there, Jane, what you were saying earlier, is it that like, you know, how? Because I was just thinking, well, could it be then, from what you're saying, possible that somebody could be fooling themselves about how much pain they are or they may be experiencing? Like, I was thinking just even about myself. Sometimes I feel like I avoid things because I feel like I'm too hypersensitive to pain, or because of past experience, or is that actually something that can be socialized into you?
Yes, it can be. It can be. So
okay.
So people, and in my opinion, our current society has taught people to ignore or try to get a high from the pain of tearing muscle fibers, which when you work out, there is some amount of tear and repair that's going to happen, but they go to quite the extreme, and where it's like, oh, this is the kind of pain I will ignore, which is kind of stupid because that's the pain that's the problem. Ruptures are the problem. Tearing is the problem. When you get to fascia, you can have something that's more akin to a shearing pain. Fascial layers are flooded with hydration. At their healthiest, they're very hydrated. As we get older, we get drier. If you ever hold a baby, they feel like gelatinous goo. That's because they're extremely wet. They retain moisture. They absorb moisture quickly. They do not lose moisture very quickly. So their fascial layers are gliding. If somebody has connective tissue disorders, usually the ones that we notice are the hypermobile ones, but there's also ones that are stiffer. The fascia will glide more and also will open more. So when I was saying there's like an organization of the fibers, some of it looks like felt, some of it has cross-hatching patterns, so that it's kind of like a net that can open up. It's also somewhat directional from what we're understanding currently. So the fascia is better at keeping things out of your body and also better at allowing your body to open up from the inside. So expanding. So if you
it's all the more important then to stay hydrated for everything, even to prolong your own life.
Yes, right? Exactly. So there's kinds of pain in the fascia that has to do with shearing, and if you completely avoid that pain and don't work on hydration, heat, movement, right? So you try to get the circulatory fluids, lymph, blood to fluff it back up, you will glue together. You will literally glue together. Okay, so those fascial layers will stick to each other. Depending on where they're organized, they can stick even more. Sometimes you can get scar tissue that will also create more of a Velcro effect. And what will happen is you will no longer be able to move out of that shape. So if somebody does like cadaver labs on very old people, what you'll see is some like older people kind of have like a really funny posture where they look like a question mark and they're just stuck that way. Yeah. It's not, it can be that the bones and the connective tissue in like your discs or in other membranes, like let's see, what's a good example? Bursas. You can have issues around just cartilage in general, right? Like that can also dry up, get sticky, yada. Okay, because it also has fascia around it. But their organs are stuck together. The fascia that goes around their organs have glued together.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, so that's a lot of what's producing that shape is that. So what does that mean? So we need to understand fascial pain, and when you're starting to get something to move again, you will get a lot of feedback from your body because it's pulling on the fibers that are surrounding your nerves. And the nerve is going, I'm stuck, hey, I'm stuck, hey, I'm stuck. So that's a problem, but how are you going to work through it? So then you need to do things like that's why these massage guns are getting really big. I've heard of a method called MELT. So we're getting more therapeutic things for fascia, foam rolling. You'll get some controversy about like when to use it, how to use it, yada, yada. But that means that we're actually going to have to get familiar with a specific kind of pain and understand how to work through it and when to ease off of it so that you don't think that all pain is tearing your muscle.
I see. So then like just these things would be useful potentially to at least avoid a part of the pains that come in later in life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if it avoids the fusing together stuff, yeah.
Some people who work with fascia will say, or in Britain they call it fascia, just to be on top of that.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So if you ever hear it called that, there's some split in how we pronounce it. But they'll say like motion is lotion.
Oh yeah. Is that FASHA?
FASCIA. Fascia.
Can you put that in like somewhere?
You want me to type it down? I can do that.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yes. Not at all. Yeah. It's fascinating, and there's been just an explosion of understanding of it in the past 15 years. And getting back to Bruce Lee.
Can I say something quickly before that, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
It's gonna pop off at like 2:30, so mind if I do like a quick promo?
Yeah, go for it. Please do. No problem.
Now or
you can do it now if there's more people here. Maybe this would be a better time to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So hi, I'm Blinkwave21 here. I stream Project Sekai, Colorful Stage, the Hatsune Miku game off of my phone, so I don't really interact with chat, but I try to get chat to interact with each other because I think that's cool. I stream like around 9, 12, any hour that's a multiple of 3 that isn't like 9 p.m. or 12 a.m. or 3 a.m., So I'll be streaming tomorrow at 9 a.m. and feel free to stop by.
Do you have a Discord link, Blink? Because I can put it into different servers to promote it.
I don't have, I can generate one now if you want.
I guess it's just that I'm not sure how I can then. I'd like to sort of like obviously bring more awareness to your stream to other people, but then I'm not quite sure how to do that. Or well, I could just send the link, I suppose.
Yeah, like I'm a new streamer, so I don't know how to like do all the
Hmm.
fancy stuff that Jane can do. So yeah,
Yeah, because I personally wouldn't be able to sort of like join in to watch much because I'm in the UK, so time zone wise, you know.
yeah, I'll send you like I'll post a link to like the main channel. Jane has like a shout out function on the chat, so like, just copy the link from that maybe.
Perfect.
And then give it to you if you don't mind. Does that work?
Yes.
Cool. Thanks for the help then.
Of course. Okay, so other thing, Bruce Lee.
And sorry for the interruption.
No, you're fine. You're totally cool. This is how we do this. Okay, Bruce Lee. Fascia. I think chi is fascia. And a couple other aspects of the body working together. So I also think autistic people would benefit from Tai Chi, Qigong, a couple other skills that explicitly have worked on movements that are helpful to understanding this fascial connection. And also fascia, think of it like you have, okay, other thing, let me back this up. So grounding, right? There's a lot of exercises that will talk about grounding. My thinking on this is that the grounding is letting your weight open up the net of fascia fully in one direction. And then that gives you the ability to extend into another point of the fascia. That to fully open it up, and then if you release that tension, right, it's kind of like you're compressing and pushing your tissue against it. When you release that, the pressure will separate the layers again. The release of the pressure will separate the layers again. And if the layers have a little bit of separation, that again is the fluids of your body lubricating. So it's like a sponge.
Jane,
right?
it's kind of funny because it reminds me a little bit of like I don't know if you know, it's those wuxia novels. You had like cultivation and stuff like that. Whenever they were finding the chi to kind of like reach the oh god, I forget like the different levels of like energy refinement. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that in some ways, like the same principles. Yeah.
Right. And I think energy, we should think of it as weight. And if you can get into this exploration, you can also find people who have other ways of modeling this. I would say that like energy is a direction of weight. If energy has kind of like no weight associated with it, because even particles have weight, then there is no physics.
Good point. Yeah, you're right, because it just makes me think that when I'm grounding per se, it's sort of like, how would I describe it? It's kind of like a weird felt tangibility of myself, but it's hard to describe because I can in some ways feel the individual parts of my body and even within, but then also not, you know, like I can sort of like feel my individual atoms, you know, vibrating or whatever. But at the same time, like I'm aware of like their, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's just, yeah, it's, Maybe it's just something that I need to get a bit deeper into, and perhaps I'll sort of like have a bit more, insight into that.
Yeah. And then it gives, you know, what we need to work on for the time being is like reclaiming the fact that we get to participate in understanding the body instead of saying, oh, but things around the body are social, right? And we have to be good at socializing, right? In order to get to, and no, you don't. Your body is your reality tester. Right? Like if somebody's telling you something about reality that's
right, it's the thing that informs you of your limitations.
Yes.
Right? And like you can't, like, as much as you might want to sort of like be perfect to like the socialization game for the various reasons, like you can only do so much within your limits and boundaries, and you have to know them, otherwise you'll be reaching in the dark.
Yes, exactly. And I'm going to argue that we have a different set of embodied metaphors because it is very different to have autism, and the brain is a material actual structure. So if anybody's like, I think autism is located in the spirit or located in non-material, bizarre, like abstract planes, it's not.
It comes from the gods, yeah.
Right. No. It's like you have a material difference in your brain. The end. Period. Right? Okay, that means that if you believe and buy into the theory of embodied cognition, and also neurolinguistics gets into like embodied metaphors as the primary way that we have to understand reality, that we have all of these abstract social conventions and institutions and behaviors and designs for physical objects are coming out of our embodied state, then go back to the embodied state. And for us as autistic people, we need to understand how that embodied sense has changed by the neurological difference that we have, which I really think it is. So then, but what's intact with us? I do not think that autism changes our fascia, or in so much as sometimes, I'll add one caveat to that. We are a little bit higher likelihood of having EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a range of connective tissue disorders. There's different types of it that usually are going to lead to hypermobility, but can have other implications for like organs and your health. So we may be more hypermobile, maybe. But outside of that, we're not losing the experience of moving through the body by having autism. So why don't we get away from the downstream metaphors of being embodied that are applied to a different person, a person without our brain, without the changes in our movements made by our brain, and go back into like, well, okay, how does the human body move? How do I move? Let me do that first, and then have, I think, some faith that we will then come up with metaphors downstream and become philosophers like we see with Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee starts moving into a philosophical realm. By the way, Bruce Lee was a champion ballroom dancer. So,
cool.
Yeah, right. So
it's so funny that you mentioned that, because what you were saying to me about like the standing upright, right, with the positions of psoas and stuff like that. It reminds me of a manga, and I think you maybe actually even know about that one, Welcome to the Ballroom or whatever. It was all about like ballroom dancing, and like it just reminded me of like some things that they say there too, where about the positions of the body, what it's about, like, and then it goes in sort of like more of the philosophical framework about what the spirit of the practice is.
Yeah.
But then even better, like this, it's amazing with this sort of experience that you've met, Bruce Lee's sister, and then like later on you kind of, remembered him in a sense, or maybe just got into him a bit more. It just reminded me now so much of just the other day or last Sunday. I sat down to watch the HBO documentary. What was it called? Until the Wheels Fall Off. It's the one about Tony Hawk, you see. And like for me, it was like a, kind of like a similar kind of person, big role model and stuff like that. But then this is the first time that I properly looked into his life. And it seems to be like one for one, that sort of thing. It's something where he too just didn't understand. Like he also had, I think, mobility issues. His body was different when he was younger, like smaller too, got bullied for it.
Right.
And then he found his way of being able to work through his bodily autonomy through skating. And then he kind of obviously revolutionized the whole field because of his own sort of like hypermobility. And then he put his skills, invented lots of tricks. You kind of obviously know the story. But it just, even from that, I really actually recommend that interview, because towards the end of it, like a lot of those skaters, now that they've reached their like, older years, they talk about, you could say just the sport, but they talk about it from the philosophical framework. And it's just amazing because, a lot of them didn't necessarily have the education to have, like, let's say even the, the different resources to articulate some of the stuff, but then it still kind of hits you because they're talking about something profound. But anyway, just to me, like it kind of made me want to get back into skating again. I wonder if it's the best thing in terms of health.
It could be. Well, I think if you get into skating, I would just say my recommendation is that do something that people, they're called like energy work. I'm sure there's a couple other modalities, but something like Tai Chi, Qigong, I'm going to be taking this to get more into that too, because I think it's like a very long established practice of working with the body on the level of connective tissue.
Well, I was laughing in my head when you said Qigong earlier, because it's like my quote-unquote breatharian friend who I sometimes, kind of turn an ear, blind ear to, as it were, when he talks about some of this stuff. But, he recommended Qigong to me quite a bunch of times. And I must have felt a bit resistant to that. But you see, now if you're recommending it.
Yeah. Let's check that out. So that's kind of where I think my processing of this all has gone to, is like, I also, I want to make my own like ideas around this, but what the clip that we looked at where Bruce Lee said he no longer believes in styles.
Yeah.
I think that's fascinating, because a style is a social institution,
right,
with hierarchies.
Rules.
Yeah.
It's imposing rules, right, unnecessarily.
Right. Whereas what he's suggesting is that, like, discovering your own body in motion is the important thing to do.
Like the hurdles, perhaps, or at least just like, this reminds me of what, like, the fellas said in the Tony documentary, that like when you're trying to find your limits, as it were, to sort of see how your body moves in specific ways, counter to perhaps styles. I've sort of had this to some extent in different areas of my life. You get opposition, right? People will talk about the consequences.
Yeah.
They try to dissuade you, and then you can internalize those beliefs. And even just obviously today, I'm struggling with like lots of deeply internalized like beliefs. And I mean, even down to the fact of just exercising. Like, to me, it's I'm kind of struggling in some ways, and it's not just exercise; it's food as well. And I mean nutrition, right? When I'm doing some things for my health, it feels like an obligation, right? And I know that, like, obviously, if I'm pushing pushing myself to do it, but if it feels like an obligation, that's not good. But then I struggle just to sort of be able to enjoy it, and maybe deep down, because often I've been told, that I'm not somebody who's defined by my body, right? And I was very much shoehorned into like performing academically, right? And that's where my parents and culture invested. So it's very hard. I don't know. I'm struggling to get out of that.
Yeah, right. And I'm saying, or suggesting, I think that autistic people have to know that, like, that's our birthright to spend time with our body, and that people's beliefs about us are wrong, partly because they also are not inside of their body. Like, they're not, shall I say, opening up their curiosity in the direction of how their body moves. That's what I want to encourage people to do. So you already have the curiosity, and it's funneling in different directions. But because I think we have a culture that's hyper saturated with ideologies and dogma about what the human body is, it can turn us off of taking the time with our own body. But if you're liberated, and I can say to you definitively, they don't know what the hell they are talking about, now it's back thoroughly in your domain. It's no longer the domain of society. So you can finally get a goddamn break from society, because it's aggravating.
The only tough bit for me, is like the only time that I can truly liberate myself, and it takes a while to get into that frame of mind, is when I basically have to. It's to the effect of like I have to blind myself and like all of my senses to anything relating to like other people, as it were, to that dogma, to the social stuff. Like, anytime that I slowly, if I have to interact with, this society or things out there, or like, God forbid, like I check kind of the news a little bit, it's so easy to just slide back into that. And then, like, I kind of have to redo it again. I have to blind myself, as it were, and go through that process to then be able to sort of like work in a vacuum without like frames of comparison, say, right?
Yeah.
Because then when I'm in that blind space, I don't worry about consequences. Fear kind of doesn't get to me about like, oh, what'll happen if I do this or don't do this or whatever. which is like, some people seem to have an easier time with it. They just don't care, or they're like, it seems, maybe, I don't know, they have more sort of like spirit to, just sort of go against other people. Like they can be just very, I don't know, what's the word, not contrarian, but I don't know, because to me it's like, maybe that's what it means to come from a kind of like a people pleasing sort of like past, where it makes you sort of hyper aware of now that you're kind of quote unquote breaking the rules, like everybody that you've known. And that's happened to me, where like everybody that I've known pretty much, like, those people are gone from my life. But then like when it's within you, it's still kind of, that's like the last hurdle. Like it's like your greatest enemy is yourself, as they say.
Yeah. Well, and then I guess, okay, so
Your false self.
yeah.
False self, of course.
Yeah. I like, in the interview that we watched, there's also this quote that all knowledge is self-knowledge, which I think is super interesting, and I agree with. I think that, right, so I know that because my environment is pushing back on me in certain ways, I have an incompatibility. And then I started to ask, well, is the incompatibility real or imposed? I have reached the conclusion that it is extremely imposed, such that any real conflicts, I can't find out what they are, because the imposition is enculturated or inculcated into people, so much so that they won't let a natural thing happen. They're mechanical men. They're going along with the program, no matter what it's doing to them or other people. The program has to be followed. And when we're able to make that distinction and then say, okay, well, what is self-knowledge based on? I don't think the self is a non-material, metaphysical entity. I think the self is your brain and the entire organism of your body. I think that's who you are and what you are. And what we think of as the self is the memories that we've been able to store, and also the imaginative capacity to use the function we call memory in a direction towards hypotheticals or counterfactuals. That's what we sometimes call the self. We call the self the things that we remember. But all of this is constructed on the idea that your reference point is your embodied experience, that everything is starts with the concept of understanding you are a body. And what we reject is the bad model of the body, not our own body. And then from there, we're able to maybe get a break from all of the other bullshit that's pushing up against us. And then the contradictions are more tolerable because we have a place where they don't rule our fucking lives, which is moving your body.
Yeah, that's true. That really helps. That helps a lot, actually. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate that.
Happy to help.
Actually, this and you just reminded me, as well as bodily embodiment, this brings up like a concept that I'm sort of getting more curious about, and I found actually from my research into ancient literature and philosophy. It's one of eroticism, right? And I don't mean eroticism specifically from a over superficial sexual connotation, but like what, let's say, like in ancient Greece, eros, right? The concept of eros was considered as, and the notion, I think, of being spirited, or rather kind of like of what it, like, I guess to me, like my current curiosity is sort of like what eroticism means, and like when people talk about living like an erotic life per se, as in like when we talk about passions and things like that, right? Again, I think like I have a sense that this is something that's like a cornerstone to living. It's also something big that people don't talk about, and I think with autism, I think this also has some connection that would be very important to analyze. At least maybe it's an individual thing for me personally, but yeah,
no, I agree. I agree with you. And I think, so, okay, let's say that our interests are embodied, like that we are interested in abstract things because of some aspect of our embodiment. Mm-hmm. Making that connection would be somewhat difficult because we're moving from an experience that's evolved, that humans have, that we don't fully understand, but that we have to argue that we have no reference point. We don't have knowledge beamed into us from the astral plane or some other plane.
No.
That all of our knowledge is built off of moving our little wiggly body around, and the organs that we have for perception of our environment and for noticing changes to ourselves, to the environment, right? And that maybe when we have a bias towards noticing certain kinds of changes, we then develop certain kinds of interests. That the argument would be that it must follow from that. The problem is that it's hard to explain it, right? Like it would be, and maybe it's so outside of the purpose of language that it's hard to talk about.
It seems like you're pulled to it, like
yeah.
inexplicably.
Yes, right? yes, exactly. So that inexplicable draw that we feel, I think we need to have people follow it, and it's going to be fully embodied, which means there's different kinds of mechanisms in the body that regulate things, including signals of relief or signals of pain and danger being resolved.
Cool.
Oh, sorry, I got cut out.
Yeah, you're back now.
Sorry. Yeah. So I was saying that I think we're a pain-based organism or a threat-based organism, and that we really appreciate innate, like appreciation itself is built on the concept of pain relief, fear relief, threat relief, right? So if that's the case, then
interesting,
right? And we're go ahead.
Well, that's an interesting one because I'm not so sure. Almost like when I've never thought about it until now. But like when I appreciate something, or at least it's sort of weird because I sort of like never was taught or given the model for what appreciation is. So now that I'm practicing some of these things that they teach you in psychology manuals, it's not so much that like I'm aware of like some pain being released. Mm-hmm. Like gratitude, right? Is that what gratitude is? I'm not so sure. It's like I don't know. There's just some weird spiritual things tied to it. I feel almost like, it's just because I'm alive, because there's these things that are happening that might have bigger meaning. But otherwise, I can't put my finger on it. I don't know.
So I'm going to argue for my position. So I think that pain or pain. Okay, so first, it helps to situate it thus: pain and threat are the same pathway neurologically. There's not a separate pain pathway and threat pathway. They're the same one. Okay, so when we look at regions of the brain,
because we can say that like
and
threat
neurons,
is like it's like the presupposition of like pain coming later.
Yes. And for whatever reason, it was more economical for this to evolve thus. And in humans, maybe it's just that it's all an abstraction at this point anyway. Who knows? Okay, but when you're feeling gratitude or you're feeling appreciative, I'm going to argue that that does include safety. That does include a feeling of, I have experienced safe conditions and I have experienced relief of problems or the potential relief of problems, that this environment cares if I have problems. This environment will respond when I am experiencing a threat or pain or some sort of signal that all is not well, and I must respond with an action or a movement into a place where I no longer experience that problem, that threat to my safety, to my my ability to know what's going on, right? The more I know what's going on, the more I can avoid dangerous things. So I think it all is that. That's my belief of it, because where else would we get a sense of something being important? I think that important itself is rooted in our own...
Well, it's value, isn't it? Personal values and such.
Well, yeah. Well, but the thing is, like, if you go back, like, personal values, you don't get to have personal values without your brain and body functioning.
Good point. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think I agree with you. Yeah, when you put it like that, it does
Right.
seem to be tied to pain and Fred. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then it's good to get onto that, because now you're less susceptible to be sold an idea that there's a magical place that you'll get to go to where you don't experience pain ever again.
Right. You could say that that's a delusion.
Right. It's a weird impossibility. It's almost like a denial of what you are, and it's unhealthy, because having a fear response to your own, or shall I say, a danger response to your own danger alert is not good.
That's sort of this I feel is such a perennial human condition sort of thing, like the fear of death, right? And that kind of being tied to a lot of religions, because right, people fear, I guess, the threat of pain and and then well, and then it kind of makes you think of how dumb these religions are, because then, well, of how clever maybe in some ways is what they intend to do, but the fact that they also promise you infinite pain after death on top of that,
Yeah.
right, in
Yeah.
hell and whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
why would they do that? And that's
It doesn't make sense. So I don't believe it is possible to experience. Okay, okay, I don't think that human brains can either experience nothing but pain or nothing but relief.
yeah, because it's in some ways like our body is what's the word, regenerating and degenerating at the same time, isn't it?
Right. One, also that pain and relief are like the same thing. So you can't actually divide them. It just feels like a divide, because that's how we make decisions, is by moving away from pain, or even if we take on some amount of pain and threat, there's supposed to be a greater reduction in the possibility for pain and threat in the future if we take on this
Like you were
suffering.
saying, like with the gym bros, maybe like what's the word, overtraining, because they don't want to maybe feel some greater pain from, I don't know, looking bad or something later on,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, something like that. Yeah, exactly. So if that's what we are, it's weird to promise like nothing but pain to bad people and nothing but pain relief to good people. This is the Abrahamic Plutonic, sorry, Pluto, why not? Platonic notion of ideal states, that these are separate things as opposed to just the same thing, and that
I think like
it's
it's
just
also
impossible. It's not even it's not even something
I need
worth.
to read the.
I
Go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, it's not even worth something trying to make a hypothetical thought experiment for, because it's nonsense.
I was just gonna say myself just that I need to read into the Platonic text again from where I kind of left off, because as I recall, I thought Plato, when he talks about the forms, the ideal forms, like wasn't he specifically talking about, deities, universal concepts? I get the feeling like almost a lot of these concepts were misconstrued, and then they were then sort of like imposed onto human beings, which I don't think even the original, Greek philosophers kind of saw it that way.
It's
They like
possible.
even yeah, it's possible, I think.
I think it's possible. I think it's hard. My exposure to it, I think it was already interpreted from the lens of Christianity, and also just like Abrahamic religions in general have borrowed from Platonic idealism to sell their religion to Rome and other places. So it's a little bit
Right, because it's
hard.
like if you're like a small cult in like a big empire, you're being oppressed. But then also like obviously where it started, right, in the kingdom of Judea, and like it being very militaristic and sort of like in stark competition with its neighbors at the time, then it's like a type of it is, I guess, for the time, a winning strategy. They just make a faith where you can just promise that ultimate good to people. Right. And this will work especially with people who are most vulnerable, who are most oppressed, where they're looking for like a hope higher than hope, you could say. right?
And there's
Maybe that's why.
there's contradictions. I've not read translations of Plato that don't have this contradiction. That's a problem. But it also, in our culture, I think that contradiction is mostly coming from Abrahamic dogma that then tucks itself into all kinds of people's brains, even people who think they're like the most atheist ever, atheism. So what happens is, in my opinion, we look at pain and sometimes we'll say, oh, well, that person is a martyr. Their suffering is noble. And if someone, we might make people who are suffering try to feel better through that, right? Which I'm rejecting. And I'm currently dealing with some amount of existential depression around being autistic and seeing what I'm seeing in the world and just being disappointed, like our earlier conversation. So, okay, so I don't like being told that my suffering is noble. Fuck that. Not no. But equally,
right, it's not a purpose.
Yeah.
It's not a purpose to live either.
Yeah. And then other people will say, well, the suffering is proof that you're bad. So they make both claims that this is the meaning of your pain and suffering. And I reject this all completely. I think that my suffering is information about needs that my body has, and I don't know how to interpret them because my society has believed a lot of things that I think just clearly can't be true. So back to my argument of like moving the body, you're allowing yourself to experience painful states and states of relief without attaching a narrative onto them about how this means that you are a martyr, a bad person, a good person, a person who needs to do these responsibilities to society because you had sensations in your body. Like, why does my embodied experience, like the reality of that and me getting to explore it, have to be policed by my society? So it's like a place where we can find a sanctuary because we can just notice that we're starting to get a message chime in when we have basic feelings of pain and relief about what this must mean, about how we are in the social hierarchy, how worthy we are, how valuable we are. And my main critique of society is it doesn't know the value of people at all, and frankly is pretending to care when it doesn't.
Right. It really doesn't. And this, like, it's in different ways, like we were talking about, like, you know, the ways that we're taught to connect with our bodies and what our bodies mean, is just, it's downright harmful, right? For women, it's very clear, right? Colors obviously so many of the recent movements, but then even like for men, like I was reading this one book, Under Saturn's Shadow, and like it really kind of elucidates how men, by and large, it's like, what is your body? It's meat. It's meat to be put into the grinder, for the sake of the ambitions of men who are just as scared as you, but I guess it must be like a certain sociopathy that they've like honed to a certain degree, where like, over the generations, it kind of creates these crazy systems that we live in. Yeah.
Well, and I think it is sociopathy or psychopathy, maybe is better. Be really technical, that it actually reaches the level of like the clinical realm. They're not just antisocial. They've lost the ability to understand from the position of mirror neurons that this other person has sensations. But I would then argue the people doing that don't actually experience this embodied state that I'm advocating for, that you can find with like the management of what might be called chi, or you could just say fascia, or you can, you know what I mean, or just curiosity about the sensations in your own body.
Right. And so like it feels like this is some things seem to connect to that. Like I was reading some stuff. I feel like, there seems to be a correlation with narcissism, but then specifically from the point of being that, like, let's say in a consumer society as it's been developing to this present day, like, there's more of a concern around signs of things, signs of happiness, signs of education. And then that must be it. It must be coming from people who are not capable of experiencing these things bodily, So like they're chasing these shadows, and like, but they're obviously not filling this void. So they're just making it worse and worse, because it's like a drowning person almost, when you're trying to, or they're trying to save themselves, and they'll just do anything to survive, but they're just gonna drown anything else alongside them, I don't know,
Yes.
that's just the analogy that popped
Okay.
to mind.
I like that a lot, and it kind of ties something together. I was talking to support last week, or I think it was, where, okay, there's qualities, like you were just saying, of people that are very competent, and not only competent, but able to improve a skill, an ability, an idea, and the ability and skill and idea will actually get better over time if this person participates in it because of their attitude towards it. Like they're really learning. They're really able to do what they say they wanted to do. They have some amount of I guess power on some level, right? Because of these qualities.
It's also vision. They'd also have to.
Right.
I think it's like they have to have a certain vision for it, because I think the reason why a lot of the people who chase these signs of things is, like, say for example, if you're chasing prestige, wealth, or influence to get a fancy car, but what you want is connection with people, but you can't connect with people, then oh fuck, oh, it's happening again, where I'm forgetting. I forgot the point that I was gonna raise initially. You go ahead. I'm sorry. I completely
Okay, well,
forgot.
maybe this might help. So the properties that people say are important are agreed upon, and I'm like, well, then how come nobody has the properties? Like, all these people you say have these properties, no, they don't. They clearly do not have those qualities. And it's so, what support was saying is that it's so true, like real, that these properties do behave that way, and that if humans have those properties, you don't have to understand it at all. And the meme of that being a true thing continues and persists in society. So that, like, this is so accurate that even when we don't do it whatsoever, there's still some a kind of knowledge that these are the qualities and properties that are important. And then what's crazy to me is, like, because I think people aren't experiencing them in an embodied way, and it's like there's no like game recognized game of like, ah, yes, you too have worked on these principles and really do have them. There's no accountability or checking on the accuracy of the claim that this person has these properties, right? And then people will argue back and forth about the person having these properties, and it's like, but they clearly don't. Like that's what kind of gets to me, is that we have a society right now, and that's narcissism, right? Where we're pretending the emperor's new clothes is definitely there. We know what the properties should be on some level, but we don't really. It's just that, like, they're so important, they're so valuable, they're so in accordance with the natural laws that we have to interface with, that we don't forget it entirely, even when we don't have anybody doing it.
Right. I feel like it's like directly proportional to the desperation that builds the more and more disconnected people feel from those traits, from those properties, right? The body, at least, or like, let's say, like, certain needs, maybe the body has certain needs, but then, like, people just don't know how to connect to them. They kind of fret, or like, so I think they'll frantically fret more and more about how to go about getting them done, or over these dysfunctional ways. Or maybe I'm getting bogged down. Maybe I'm not making any sense.
Well, no. I think people don't know how to refresh or learn what these things are.
And then they're also afraid to admit that, to show the vulnerability, right? That they don't know, that they're lost.
Yes, that they're lost. Yes. I strongly agree with that. And I think the way that people have gotten lost has to do with, okay, so all of your compasses, all of your maps are metaphorical extensions of just being embodied. So if you don't have a sense of what the hell is going on from the perspective of your body move, well, so I'm saying that all concepts are extensions of what it's like to be a body that moves through space. And so when people get lost, I think they would get a better sense of what not being lost would feel like if they were to do movement skills, and specifically movement skills that encourage you to pay attention to all of the signals in your body and not exclude them, not say, oh, not now, not this thing right now. I don't want my body to send me this signal right now, because there's something about that process being done poorly that means the concepts downstream become absolute nonsense and people start to make no sense. So even just the idea that like an intellectual person is somebody that just lives in their head and doesn't use their body is I think it's nonsense. And most examples of people that we really like did have movement practices, actually, if you look at it, which is really interesting. And in so much as you have somebody that can't, they might have a dramatic movement experience that they need to think about a lot, like for example Hawking's. He had to feel his body move into a state of atrophy from another state. So he had a ton of information from his body.
It kind of made me think of what you were saying earlier, when like, you know, muscles sort of stretch and then you probe them and then you feel the activation. So like it's like whether like in Hawking's case where like his body was atrophying, or then the opposite case if you're sort of like becoming mobile, right, or you're doing things.
Right.
It's like it's necessary to activate. Well, it's just necessary to activate the whole system, as it were, right?
Yes.
To be fully conscious of all the things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think if you do have the ability to move, it would be very good to work on that aspect and try. I think mobility is really important, because if it's possible to get feedback that way, it's also likely going to make other health conditions better and give you a lot of relief. So if you work on your body, some pain that is not resolving, you may be able to improve, and that will give you a better sense of like, oh, problems can be solved.
Yeah.
And, you know, conversely, it can be good to also know that sometimes problems are not currently solvable, and to have peace with that. And you'll encounter both of those things if you do attempt movements.
The latter part is what I struggle with more, and it's like my old, like when I was at the YMCA before I moved to this place, the mental health supporter there, like I had a talk with her this Thursday, and she told me something that in some ways she said before, and it's like the whole sitting within uncertainty. Now, perhaps maybe then what it is that I'm still relatively quite a mobile person, even though I may not be at my most optimal state yet. But I've noticed some big problems that I have. This prison that I've identified I find myself in is of unrelenting standards, in a sense. And so often I don't doubt my capability to do things and accomplish tasks, but what I sometimes get stuck in is setting the bar too high, or like not being sure like where this sort of like fine balance point between sort of like getting it just right and being just good enough, as it were,
right,
and then not being too perfectionistic. That's still a hard one.
Yeah.
And it comes from trauma in my case, of course, because of my experience. But yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think that actually resolves if you stick with it. That this doesn't sound weird.
Oh, that's just the hardest thing. Yeah, it's
Isn't
only
that weird?
The hardest thing, but you're right.
So yeah, I think that as you develop a more mature observation of this thing that is like all these signals in your body, as you do it over and over again, there'll be a period of like resetting and recalibrating your ideals and the actual experience that you've had. And if you do that long enough,
I love
go
I
ahead.
just love the image that you just gave me in my mind. I just mean to interject with this. It's like it's like a car. You're trying to get the car started, but then it's like the clutch is being grazed too much, and then you stall, and then you try to do it again. So like right now it feels like that, and I'm trying to get moving.
Yeah.
But I've not got there yet. Yeah.
Right. And then you kind of have to just keep trying to start the car, because on some level the coordination to start it, the ideal of it is clearly wrong. It's not that you're doing it wrong. And this is my argument with autism as well. It's not that we're doing things wrong. We were told it was possible for us to do something we're disabled at over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I just fundamentally disagree. And I have evidence to be optimistic that we can still get things done, because we also have all of this like antagonism saying like, well, autism can't be that disabling. Look at how you're here, there, and wherever. I'm like, okay, well, I got here somehow, but I know it's not the way that people told me to. And similarly with movement, if people believe movement works a certain way, and then they say, well, look, you're over here and you have this, you must have done the thing we said it is. When they are lying or it's not true, right? If you just keep doing the movement or doing the thing or doing extensions of it, you will start to build an awareness of what must actually be there, because when you're moving your body, a consensus of people are not deciding if it works or not. Even if they weigh in and impose their beliefs about what works or not, it doesn't work or not because of their consensus.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. But it's like this is bringing to mind like the experience that I had when I had to give like reports. So when I applied for the disability benefits, right, in regards to autism, because of my circumstances, because I kind of needed it in order to have the breathing room to, get some safety to work on like, the trauma, and then sort of figure out where where the next state, what the next stage in life is, because I was having this quarter life crisis. Well, I am anyway. But it's scary or hard sometimes to just simply say to, these professionals or the people, these are things that I just cannot do, and I am done trying to prove this, right? But I've had these issues of like people will just outright say, I don't believe you. But what about this thing that you did back then, right? And I'm still dealing with like I'm still sort of like masking in some ways out of reflex, right? And sometimes I push myself to try to do something that, as you say, I am just disabled at, but I still am doing it out of reflex.
Right.
And then the moment that somebody just sees that, they'll be like, no, you're lying, or like you're not like this. Obviously, they'll say you're not autistic. And then in my case, it's scary to like sort of like try to say that outright, because then they'll take away the accommodation from you using these like loose little excuses, and then like you then feel afraid, like how am I going to take care of myself, because then I don't have any family and all that jazz.
Yeah. And that's the problem, is like we're having people's decisions about how things work, their ideal of how it works, which they're frankly not actually testing, right, imposed on us, and then they're saying like, well, this is how it works. You cannot possibly exist. You do not exist. Therefore, you cannot get help, because we believe that this other thing is true. So we're not interested in exploring if our model is wrong. We already decided that it's right.
But what they're doing is they'll basically bully you into submission, and then like hope that you're not gonna cause, chirp up again, as it were, cause trouble. Because that's what it feels like. Yeah.
Well, and I wonder, I haven't navigated the system that you are currently, or the people that you're having to interact with specifically, so I don't know how possible this is. But
well,
like,
it's
go ahead.
just, I mean, I think I might have told you very briefly, like when I had my psychological assessment the first time round, I didn't have many supports to speak on my behalf, right? I've told them about my experiences, both from the past and present. And it's just, maybe it's because bad luck, or just the system is pretty shit with the NHS. They came back to me, and rather than seek further investigation or even just give any sort of like support that I'm still meant to be entitled to, they just did this. They said that my accounts were delusional. that I may be more likely to be at risk, that I might be suffering from prodromal symptoms of a psychotic disorder.
Oh boy.
But without any verification or anything like that. And then get this. I had an assessment with the early intervention psychosis team, not because of them, but because I myself initiated a safeguarding case, just because of my own volition. They found out that I don't have any signs of psychosis.
Right.
And then I afterwards found out that they had this whole thing where they judged me as delusional. And they didn't tell me anything. They didn't come back with any news. And then as I found out, that decision is the reason why when I had my first autism assessment, it came out as inconclusive. Because they said that according to a previous medical assessment that you had, we just can't give a direct answer as to whether you're on the spectrum or not, because you might be potentially delusional. So now,
wow,
I just realized the damage that did is it's insane.
Yeah.
Pretty quick. Yeah.
Right. Well, and then so the argument, and you can kind of, I guess, do this in your head to these entities that are kind of living in your head now. It's like checks on. You're trying to check your own sanity. That's fair, right? So you've installed these people as like little guides in your head to make sure your sanity isn't getting off the rails, and that nobody wants to be delusional. Got it. Well, I should hope. Most people don't want to, so it makes sense that you're trying to check for it. I check for it. I get it. But like, they are saying because we observed these qualities and these qualities, number one, their claim is that their observations are correct. Number two is their claim is that they found contradictory details, right? Or something that it contradicts autism. They said like, oh, you can't have autism because we think autistics can do this but not that, and you can do that but not this. Okay, well, how do they defend that? Like, how do they would like prove it? Like, you know what I mean? Like basically, if somebody's saying to you, I believe you don't have a disability, basically, that's what they're saying. You don't have this disability because we think the process of accomplishing certain things would be prevented by that disability. I'm like, okay, well then how does the process work? Right? I need them to offer me a model, which nobody's doing, right? They're just saying we're the experts, la la la. Okay, well, do they know how it works? Do they know how autistic people are doing that, even or not doing it? Do they know how autistic people are not succeeding in that?
Right, but let me tell you, so the way that it works in this country is, I think at most they'll do like a cursory evaluation based on the DSM-5, right, or something like similar to that, and then also the bodies here who give accommodations, like the welfare system, for instance, right? They check I think they're called the ADLs in the US or whatever.
Activities of daily
so
living.
Basically, yeah. Right. It's just if you just show a sign that you've done this one thing, like even once, right, and it goes against it, that's enough of an excuse for them to take you off the system, and then they'll obviously judge you as not being disabled. In spite of 90% of other factors, you match them. It doesn't matter to them. It just doesn't. Yeah. And I don't know if that's necessarily like a utilitarian thing because there's not enough money, but I'm pretty sure that's not the case because because I know the politicians always do the thing of, there's corruption. They also give it to their friends. There's mismanagement of funds and the way that they're allocated. But then of course they'll say things like, we don't have enough money. We got to check to make sure that the people who are being helped are exactly the ones. Right now, in the UK, the personal independence payment, which is one of the types that you get for disability, right? It normally comes as a lump sum, like cash sum, right? And you get for the living component and for the mobility component. Now they're thinking to swap it to a voucher system where they give you a voucher for, let's say, a specialized aid or a type of therapy. But then that's actually kind of wild because the therapy itself is kind of behind in this country in a lot of ways, in a lot of things. And then you have to get lucky with the specialists that you get, right? Then never mind the wait lists. So this decision, I think, is pretty sure it's made to discourage people to then claim later. And then those who do, they just don't give a shit because, some people might just be fucked by that. So.
Yeah. Well, and I've always, there's some amount of but what if people fake it? And then
See, this boils my blood because people, then again, even people in my peer support group, right? Some of them have ADHD. Some of them have come to me and they've also said like, but I know this one guy and he said like, oh, I've frauded the system. He announces it publicly, and then they'll say, oh, so this has to happen. Like, oh, so you're going to take care of these bad actors. But then if there's a chance that you're going to fuck over the lives of millions of people, right? That's fine to you?
Yeah, also, I would argue that then I would question how good their interventions are. If their interventions are attractive to a non-disabled person, it kind of questions if their interventions are actually targeting the disability. So, for example, are you attracted to having Braille? Do you see what I'm saying here? Are you attracted to having a sign language interpreter? Are you attracted to having a ramp? Right? So the argument then is like, so are they making interventions that would actually address the disability of the person, or are they making interventions that they themselves think would feel nice?
Right. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to ramps and things like that, I suppose I get it, right, for specific like physical disabilities, but then when you have something like autism, like the way that you help it, the systems aren't set up in a way that is conducive to living with this type of disability. Right?
I'm saying
so
that
in some ways.
Oh, go ahead. Actually, you finish your thought because I have a little contrasting thought, but go for it. I want to hear the fully fleshed out.
I'm just as far as I know, like at least for now, with the way things are, like the cash, helps in order to be able to help myself in the hyper specific ways that I'm trying to figure it out. But otherwise, I don't know how more specifically they would do it that would be foolproof, to then also prove to them that it's like, you're not trying to fraud the system or whatever.
Yeah, because they don't have a fucking solution for us because they don't understand what autism is. I'm going to argue. So, and I'll argue it thus. So let's say we couldn't understand visual impairment, right? And so therefore we won't have any Braille, right? We're just broadly going to pretend that, visually impaired and unsighted people do not exist. We will have no Braille. We will have no voiceover, nothing. If you just then threw money at the people who are visually disabled, do you think they could find some ways to improve their quality of life? Because I would argue yes. Would it be targeted to their disability? No. So the reason they're getting mad at us is they don't know how to fucking help us, and they do know how to throw money at us. So now they're creating a problem that is not our problem of like, but our only solution is to throw money at you, and we don't want people to abuse the throwing money at people solution. Interesting.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But this just obviously comes at the deeper level, like of, the real solutions would be like the policy changes and whatnot. But like, I mean, I've sent my own comments to the commission that's being made for this green paper, and I'm sure lots of other people who different disabilities are doing the same, as they always are, in engaging in activism to sort of help change things. But the pace is at best it's glacial if anything ever happens at all.
Right.
And like, and the UK now and then, the UK is said to be like one of the best countries, in sort of like providing accommodations for disabled people. So and then it's already as bad as it is, right, from my own experience. But then, right, if it's the best, like the rest of the world is like in Jesus. It's
not good. It's real bad. It's super bad. Yeah. Right. And that's why. And then I'll tie it off too, so I can close off the stream because we're a little ahead of or past our schedule. But that sucks and is real, right? And I think like using the framework of what is the actual problem. Oh, they have no idea what our disability is or how to accommodate it. All they know what to do is throw money at us or our caretakers. That's it. And then we have to invent everything in a system that doesn't know anything about us. Okay, so that's the problem. If you want to feel upset about that, that makes sense. That makes a ton of sense. Like, you should be upset about that. That sucks. But then how do we get a break from that so that we don't have to feel that threat all the time? And I would say that's why we should start practicing.
Through embodiment?
Yeah, exactly. Through embodiment. We need it as a break. And it also
Right.
can make us feel better about our situation in life, because so few people are doing anything with embodiment, which might be why they don't understand our disability. That might be the problem, that they still have this
Right.
mind-body dualism because they haven't sat and figured out that it's not two things, because they aren't in their body to test their theory that their body is separate from their mind.
Yeah, that's right. Right. It's like the meme. You gotta touch grass. Because I just remembered, I love my walks, like that's another way of embodiment right there. And
Yeah.
there's so many potential different forms to it, all
Yes.
individual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We should spend time dedicated with that, and it's not a distraction, and it's not a band-aid.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is us
Yeah.
saying, okay, what is real? I'm not going to find out really good answers to it right now. And the search engines are also going to put you into a lot of irritating places. So
And misinformation.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So what are the first principles that we can get down to? Okay, well, let's just feel our bodies. Let's just do movements that give us a lot of interesting information about our body, and then we can do a little bit of research around the body, because there's some interesting theories that are coming out right now. Or you can spend time with something that's like a more ancient practice that's been developed for a long time, even where it sounds a little bit woo. Maybe the terminology
Yeah.
is goofy, fine, whatever. But then you can start talking to yourself about what you're doing a little bit, and that will give you a place where things are real. We need to go to a place where things are real, instead of being told
Yeah.
that we need to uphold the narcissistic fantasies of other people because we have a
Yeah.
disability that they don't understand, and they want to believe that they understand way more than they do. So they put it on us to babysit their delusions when we ask for help.
Yeah, pretty much. A lack of accountability. I would just want to conclude with a final angle, because you made me realize, as well as the embodiment too, like it'll help too to kind of bring community aspect of it as well, right? Like I'll think about, right, how do we embody and return, like, to stay in our bodies individually, but then, like, there's potential good avenues there with other people, right? Sports are one thing. Actually, through community projects, creative ones, actually, hell, I'd argue even sexuality, right? As fraught as it is, could be something like that. But yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
And anything human, and anything about the human society is really about the human body. And if we look at it that way, then it's more important to pay attention to the human body than to always listen to human society. We spend, right now we're getting so much feedback from human society that it's like almost a bombardment of it. Like it's too much. So we don't have to worry about that, right? They're gonna keep yelling, screaming at us no matter what. So then let's get the other
That's kind
side.
of why I say off the internet as well, because the internet just only is like the more exaggerated reflection of that, isn't it?
Right. Yes. Exactly. It's gotten hyper.
Nutty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's stop that there.
Right.
I'm gonna look up Tai Chi and Qigong in my area, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Likewise. Really appreciate the talk there. You take care, guys.
Likewise. Bye, everyone.
Ciao, ciao.
And bye to you all. Which is probably no one. One person.